And we are live for our week 3 recap. How's it going, everybody? It is Waiver Wire Tuesday. Let's get after it. We're going to be talking about biggest takeaways for fantasy football for the rest of the season that we just learned here in week 3. A lot to get through today. This is when fantasy championships are won. We have 3 weeks of data now. We have so many learnings that we can leverage in our fantasy leagues to win. I really believe, this week, next week, the following week, using the information, reacting to the data and the information we have better than the rest of our leagues. This is when fantasy football championships are truly won. Even if you're 0-3, I think you can still win your fantasy league. Even if you are 1-2, I think you can still win your fantasy league. It is not too late. And you should be acting differently if you are 0-3 and 1-2 than if you are 3-0 and 2-1. I will be giving that context throughout the live. Again, we're going through every single player, every single game, really, and really every relevant player from every single game, what this game has meant for them the rest of the season. And we'll be talking about all 3 weeks of data, not just last week. Obviously, last week, super important in the focus here. All right, so let's dive right into it. Let's start with the New England Patriots versus the New York Jets game on Thursday night. This one was abysmal. We got lucky with the free player prop in this one. Antonio Gibson with some garbage time work. I mean, my notes here are pretty brief. There's not a single startable Patriots receiver. Demario Douglas did have a good fantasy game, 14.8 PPR points, finished as a top 30 wide receiver, 7 catches, 69 yards. I still don't think he's really startable. I wouldn't call him a startable receiver. A desperation flex play, maybe in PPR. He did have 9 targets, 37.5% target share. But in this offense, doesn't mean that much. And this is guys, he was in the Wan'Dale Robinson role, which we've talked about in the past weeks. Only 54 air yards. That is not good. That's not in the top 40 receivers. Despite the 9 targets, only 54 air yards. That's what Rashid Shaheed gets on a single target a lot of the time. So, yeah, not feeling great about this entire passing attack. Jacoby Brissett is a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL. I really don't think you want to be starting any receivers in this offense. Really brutal game here for Ramondre Stevenson. Him on my do not draft list, looking a bit better after week 3. I'm not all the way out on Mondre yet. I do think we're pretty close to panic time, and I wouldn't knock you for being full panic on Mondre. Obviously, you can't really sell him after a game like this. 0.3 points for Ramondre Stevenson in what was destined to be a pretty run-heavy game script for the Pats. Only finished with 23 rushing yards. The most concerning aspect, 0 targets, 0 receptions. He had 6 carries and 0 targets. The route participation, not great. He was only running route on 10% of the Patriots passing plays, 30% route participation, by far the worst of the season for Ramondre. Antonio Gibson, the last 2 weeks, has just looked straight up better than Ramondre Stevenson. And Antonio Gibson was more involved like we predicted, partially, though, because of the garbage time. I don't think Antonio Gibson's anyone I'm super excited about still. I think we got lucky with this player prop for sure. He only played 19 snaps, 5 carries, though, only 1 less than Mondre. And he ran 5 routes. That was more than Ramondre Stevenson. Neither of the running backs very involved. He ended up getting 3 targets on those 5 routes, which is better than Mondre. But neither of these guys I'm feeling great about. Mondre is still probably someone you're going to have to start in most spots. Hunter Henry came back down to earth in this one, too. And the other note here, Drake May looked decent. Drake May did look decent. I don't think it's unreasonable to think, going back to week 2, the Pats probably would have beat the Seahawks if they played Drake May. Not very notable for this season. It seems like the Patriots are bad enough. They have enough injuries on defense already. The offense is struggling enough. We're not going to see Drake May, I don't think, unless Jacoby Brissett just gets injured, which is obviously possible. He's taken some big hits behind this bad offensive line. But Drake May did look good. There's some silver lining here in the one drive we saw of Drake May, the first drive of his career. I actually did predict we were going to see Drake May on Thursday Night Live. That was a bit of a guess and a lucky call, but I had a sense that the Pats were going to get crushed enough that might happen. And that ended up coming true. Drake May did at least look decent. He only completed like 50% of his passes, but he did march right down the field against a decent Jets defense. All right, anyways, the Jets side of the ball here. That's all for the Pats. Mondre's the only startable player on the Pats in fantasy football right now. You shouldn't feel good about anyone else, including Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas. On the Jets side of the ball in this game, this was the best game for Aaron Rodgers of the season, I think by a decent margin. Yeah, 21 fantasy points was definitely good. I think that there's some takeaways from the running backs here. 35 pass attempts pretty strong completion percentage, 77% completion percentage. The air yards per attempt, 6.1, still a little bit underwhelming for Rodgers. This team is still going to be in just some ugly games. It's a run first, defense-oriented team that's just not pushing the ball down the field very much. I'm not that excited about this offense overall for fantasy. The stuff with Garrett Wilson, I've seen a lot of people out there saying buy Garrett Wilson. I think that's a reasonable take. I think if you are a team that is 3-0 or a team that is 2-1 particularly, I think Garrett Wilson's someone I'd probably be buying. If I'm 0-3 though, and I have Garrett Wilson, I might be looking to sell because he's got a tough schedule coming up, guys. You get the Broncos this week and what's going to be probably a pretty gross game against the Broncos. They're like even worse than the Jets in a lot of ways. Like look how bad this matchup has been for all these receivers. We've seen one decent fantasy game against the Broncos at receiver. That was Chris Godwin. I think they might be the worst possible matchup for receivers. And then Lockett had a decent game week 1 and a decent, good, not great. I don't think we're going to see a massive Garrett Wilson game. The reason he's a buy, though, the reason Garrett Wilson's a buy is the underlying usage has been actually pretty good. His offense is playing slow. They're not throwing a ton, but the snap percentage has been elite. He really only came off the field in garbage time. The route participation is basically 100%. And the target share, he's been over 20% target share every single game. This is just a continuation of what we've seen from Garrett Wilson in the past. So if you're 3-0 and you can stomach, some of these floor games that are going to be coming for Garrett Wilson over the next really 5 weeks, then I don't think it's a bad buy because he's got a pretty good schedule down the stretch after the bye. His target shares are great. He is a great player. He has not scored he scored one touchdown? He did score actually in this game, which saved his fantasy day. But he only had 33 yards. Not really any big games yet. No games over 15 points yet for Garrett Wilson. So he's a buy if you're 3-0. I honestly think he might be a sell though if you're 1-2 or 0-3, depending on the situation your team is in. You got to optimize for making the playoffs. And then if you are likely to make the playoffs, then you got to optimize for having the best possible playoff team. That's the way you got to think about it with your trades and rest of the season decisions. All right. Other pieces of this game. Braelon Allen, I've been telling you to add him really since draft season. Braelon Allen's been the guy I've been on pretty extensively in terms of handcuffs. He was actually my most drafted running back in the over 500 best ball drafts I did before the season. Those teams are all doing pretty strong. They all have round 16 Braelon Allen on them. He's worth an add for sure. He's borderline startable now with the standalone value that he has. I mean, some of his work came in garbage time, but another 3 catches for Braelon Allen. Another efficient day, though, for Braelon Allen. He's been now over 4.5 yards per carry in all 3 of his NFL games. He's caught almost all of his targets, and he's getting some red zone and goal line work, too. He's not a great start, but in a pinch, he is startable, and he clearly is a league-winning handcuff if Breece Hall misses time. Like, he's just going to win leagues if Breece Hall misses time. So I do think he's well worth a roster spot at a minimum. I wanted to pull up Mike Williams here really quick. I don't have any notes on him written down, but I was curious to see if his participation would increase, and it didn't. It didn't really increase. And it is partly probably to do with the blowout. He did see more targets, 4 versus 1, but he actually ran fewer routes, played less snap percentage. This was a short week. But it does seem like him and Allen Lazard are going to be splitting that wide receiver 3 role or wide receiver 2-3 role on this team to a point that neither of them can really be trusted or started until one of them is missing time. All right, that's the Pats-Jets game. Pats are one of the worst teams in the NFL, and the Jets are looking like a pretty legitimate playoff team from a real NFL perspective. All right, next game, let's get to the Packers-Titans. Let's hop to that one next. Let me pull this up. I was actually in Nashville this past weekend. That's where I was live streaming from. So I saw a lot of Packers fans this weekend. Let's start with the Packers side of the ball. I mean Malik Willis, all-time game from Malik Willis. Does sound like Jordan Love's going to come back for this game. It does sound like that. Emmanuel Wilson played better than Josh Jacobs in this game. I don't think there's too much to read into that one. I mean, really incredible game. Really incredible play call. We're going to get to the comments, by the way. I see the comments. I see you guys. We're going to get to it. Don't worry. But right now we're going game by game, talking about all the biggest takeaways from each game. Definitely a disappointing outcome here for Josh Jacobs. Only 14 carries. His rush share was down massively, down to 40%, which is a little weird. In this one, Emmanuel Wilson was just a little bit more efficient in this game. I'm not panicking on Josh Jacobs. I'm really not panicking on this whole offense at this point. Does sound like Jordan Love's probably back next week. If he's not back next week, he's almost definitely back the following week, which is really like on the better side of the outcome after that injury initially happened. That's going to lift this whole offense. Josh Jacobs is still clearly the top running back. He was just inefficient in this one against a pretty good front seven for the Titans, 3.1 yards per carry. No major takeaways other than Impressive game from the Packers. I'm really buying all of these players. Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Josh Jacobs, even Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, I don't think are terrible buys with Jordan Love returning. Let's look at the tight end share here really quickly too. I think Tucker Kraft did pick up an injury in this one. Good to go for week 3. Maybe that was before the game. He has now 2 catches in all 3 games. That doesn't have more than 6 points. It's a desolate wasteland out there at tight end, which is why we're going to take a quick peek here at Tucker Kraft, but nothing to get too excited about. The only positive for Tucker Kraft is Jordan Love's returning soon. That's about it. That's end of list there for Tucker Kraft. Let's look at the other side of the ball, man, here. The Titans played absolutely terrible in this game. Will Levis was a turnover machine again in this one. Not even, all his fault in this one. His time to throw was kind of long, but he took 8 sacks. Will Levis got sacked 8 times in this game. Not only did he take 8 sacks, he also turned the ball over, I think, 3 times. Yeah, 3 turnovers. 8 sacks, 3 turnovers, 2 picks, 1 fumble, 8 sacks. I mean, brutal that you cannot win a football game with this amount of sacks and this amount of turnovers. And they actually were kind of in it still somehow at the end. I got to give some respect to Malik Willis with how he played. He played almost perfectly in this game. He was one of the best quarterbacks in week 3. A super impressive revenge game for him. Definitely did not see that coming from Malik Willis. But Will Levis, the air yards per attempt dove big time in this game. I feel like we started to see just a little bit of that fear from Will Levis, which is not good. We really need him being aggressively passing the ball downfield to hit that ceiling outcome for fantasy. Well off the fantasy radar right now. The only positive from this game for the Titans was DeAndre Hopkins. Calvin Ridley had a bad game. Only 1.9 points for Ridley after a good game against a good Jets defense. Really, really disappointing one here. Only 3 targets, 8% target share, only 54 air yards. 2, down game for Ridley. I'm not fully panicked on Ridley yet because the usage was really strong in week 1 and 2. I actually thought he was a buy after week 1 and 2. But, man, good to see Hopkins back and looking pretty good. 6 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Finishes as a top 20 receiver in week 3. His snap percentage was about the same, a little bit more routes total, but around the same route participation. Looks like they might just hold him, at this workload of 50% of the routes, 50% of the snaps-ish before the bye. I think after the bye, though, Hopkins might just be a full-time player. He's definitely should be rostered in all leagues. Strong usage, 20% target share, 31% of the air yards, 7 targets. Good game from Hopkins, and he looked good in this one. Scored a touchdown as well. Definitely one of the big winners of this game. Also, Spears was better than Pollard in this one, which was interesting. Definitely want to take a look at this backfield really quickly. 4 catches, 54 yards for Spears. He only played 37% of the snaps and only 30% of the route participation. The actual underlying numbers here, I think, really favored Pollard, despite the better fantasy game for Spears. Only 7 rushing yards. I think he only had, 2 rushing attempts for 7 yards, but he did have 4 catches, 54 yards to save his fantasy day, 10.1 points. Pollard did worse than that in fantasy, but the usage was actually still really strong. Pollard is, the usage-wise, still looking very, very good. 5.9 points, floor game here in what was, I thought, a pretty good matchup for Pollard. I really thought he was a high-floor play in week 3, but we saw the floor outcome here, 5.9 points. He had 3 catches, 15 yards. That's where basically all his points came from. He did see 20 routes, much better snap percentage, much better route participation here for Pollard. I care about that way more. Pollard over Spears still pretty clearly rest of season. Only 6 carries in the game. The Titans were getting crushed, though, and he was super inefficient. 2.3 yards per carry for Pollard. Definitely a little scary here. But, yeah, I'm not panicked on Pollard. The usage is good. He's still been over 15 points in 2 of his 3 games, and it doesn't seem like this usage is going to decline, even though Spears played a little bit better in this game. If anything, Pollard, I think, is a decent buy, kind of a sneaky high-floor buy. Only has 1 touchdown this season, but the usage has been good. This offense has obviously struggled, and the offensive line has struggled big time too. All right. We're going to get to the comments. Don't worry. We're 2 games down. We've got plenty of games to go. I'm going to have time to go rapid fire in the comments after. So make sure you get the comments in. I see a start Richardson or Geno comment here. I do want to get to that game. Let's see. What game should we hop to next? Let's go to the Broncos Bucks game. Let's go to the Broncos Bucks game here next. This was the first win of Bo Nix's career. Let's start with the Broncos here. This one's pretty crazy to break down because we got Lil Jordan Humphrey led the team in routes. He led the team in routes in this game with 22 routes. He had 8 targets, 23.5% target share, only 9.7 points. I really don't think he's worth even an ad in fantasy, but it does tell you a little bit about the rest of this team. This was actually a good game for Courtland Sutton in this one. He had 7 catches, 68 yards, no touchdowns. This is what I was saying all offseason. Why are we drafting Courtland Sutton based on projectable volume? What is the real ceiling for Courtland Sutton? We saw it last season. He had a career-high 10 touchdowns. He still didn't even beat 12 fantasy points per game last season. He went over 12 points in this one, but no touchdown, no real ceiling. I don't think in this offense that, the usage is good, target share is good, reception total is good. It doesn't matter. This offense is just slow, not exciting touchdown volume in this offense just in general. 29-year-old Courtland Sutton has never averaged more than 14 points per game in a season. I just don't think there's a real ceiling here. I'd be trying to sell, honestly, this volume here from Courtland Sutton after week 1. Really tough schedule looks like, too, for the better part of the rest of the season. Bo Nix did look pretty good in this one. Let's pull up his numbers here. This was a great game from Sutton in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, I do think that's sellable. Bo Nix, let's look at his numbers here quick. 9 carries, 32% of the carries for Bo Nix from this offense. Love to see that. He's been over at least 20% rush share now, all 3 games. Pretty massive for his fantasy football floor. I think rushing has a lot more to do with your floor than your ceiling. You still need to have big passing games, though, to hit a real fantasy ceiling. This is why we've seen Bo Nix, who's had at least a 20% rush share in every game. He's gotten over 10 points in every game. That's his floor. We haven't seen the ceiling yet because he's not capable yet, or hasn't shown the capability yet of big passing days. No games over 250 passing yards yet. Did score another rushing touchdown in this one. Air yards per attempt, not an exciting 6.9 here. 6 yards per attempt, not great. Let's see, I think he took at least no sacks, no interceptions in this one, so that was good to see. But still not really pushing the ball downfield too much. Really only one game where we saw him push the ball downfield against the Steelers. Now he gets the Jets. This Jets-Broncos game, guys, worst game of the week. This feels like, the Jets-Pats game, heading into that game a little bit. You can't start anyone from this game. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, end of list, I think. I think that's literally the end of the list of guys that would start in that game. Going to be an absolutely gross game. On the other side of this game, actually really quick, before I move on to the Buccaneers, I did want to just note, for the deeper leagues, for the Dynasty League people out there, we'll look at Javonte McLaughlin here in a second, but Troy Franklin, a notable target share in this game. It's just notable, this was his first real game scoring a fantasy points. This was his first game with fantasy points, 3.1 fantasy points, only 2 catches, 11 yards, nothing to get excited about, but a notable 15% target share at least. That definitely stood out to me. Maybe we see his role increase. He did play with Bo Nix in college. He was picked in this year's draft, does have a good speed. Nothing exciting here from him other than he finally had some targets. That was it. Just a quick note there. And then McLaughlin scored the touchdown over Javonte Williams, but only at 7 yards, 1 TD, only 1 catch, 7 yards. The running back target share in this offense is down tremendously year over year. One thing I was really bullish on in fantasy and draft season was this backfield getting tons of targets. They led the NFL in running back targets last season. We only had 1 catch for McLaughlin in this one. Javonte Williams had 4 catches, 29 yards, which isn't terrible, but he only ran a route on 33% of the plays, only 50% snap share. Both these guys are pretty unstartable right now in fantasy. Javonte, horrible start to the season, under 12 points, all 3 games. And I think Batty was the guy that also mixed in. And, you get really, really rough if you got 3 running backs mixed in. He actually had 7 points in this one, 70 rushing yards. He had the most yards in this backfield. He only played 13 snaps, but he didn't get targeted. He didn't run any routes. I do think he is a capable receiving back too, though, from his past. He mixed in a little bit notable. None of these running backs really are startable right now in fantasy. All right, going on to the Buccaneers offense. This was, a down game for sure for the Bucs. I hope you sold Rachaad White when you could. If you were listening to these lives, earlier in the season, you would have sold Rachaad White if you've been using the Walter Picks app. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Walter Picks app yet, that's what's on the screen on the YouTube live. We're live on TikTok and YouTube. And if you come to the YouTube live, it's a better viewing experience. I can share my screen. We got the Walter Picks app on screen. We're looking through all the most important data for every single player as we talk through it. And if you have the Walter Picks app, you also, would get tons of this transaction advice that's coming out during this live stream, well advanced in the live stream. We post weekly, 20 transactions that we recommend, adds, drops, trades in the Walter Picks app. Those are all free. Don't know why you don't have the app yet. Link is in the YouTube bio, in the YouTube description, in the TikTok bio. Anyways, Rachaad White is full panic time for sure with Rachaad. We were fully panicked on Rachaad White last live stream. I was a little panicked even after week 1, even though it was a decent week 1 for Rachaad White. Look at these rushing yard numbers, guys. 31 rushing yards, 18 rushing yards, 17 rushing yards through 3 games for Rachaad White. Goes under 10 points for the second straight week. Rachaad White, he saved his day again with catches. PPR leagues, 5 catches, 18 yards. He is still a good receiver. He's still a good receiving back, one of the better receiving backs in the NFL. I think he still will have this receiving role, but you can't start him really right now. Maybe in deeper PPR leagues, he's startable as like a flex. The snap percentage wasn't terrible, but that's almost definitely going down based on the comments from the coach after the game. And the reason is his 6 carries, a continuation of what we've seen from Rachaad White in the past, has been under 3 yards per carry every game this season. This was actually the most efficient rushing game of Rachaad White's season with 2.8 yards per carry. He's not good at running the ball. He hasn't been good at running the ball since he entered the league. And the whole hand wavy thing we were doing before the season of, the other running back struggled too. So maybe it was just the offense being tough to run in. Well, now you can't use that excuse because Bucky Irving is not struggling as much as Rachaad White is. Bucky Irving is clearly a better early down runner than Rachaad White. It's clear as day. He had 70 rushing yards in this one, only 9 carries. He was at 7.8 yards per carry. He has been over 3 yards per carry in all 3 games. Guys, Rachaad White has not been over 3 yards per carry in a single game. So yeah, full payback time on Rachaad White. He's still going to have some value in PPR leagues. You're not going to be really able to sell him for like anything at this point. I think if you can get basically anything that improves your starting lineup for Rachaad White, you can package maybe with someone else, probably worth doing. And Bucky Irving, if you have the Walter Picks app, or you've listened to these live streams, or you follow us on TikTok at Walter Picks, like you knew to add Bucky Irving weeks ago. This is nothing new. We've written up at Add Bucky Irving for 3 consecutive weeks. We actually had Add Bucky Irving before week 1. So we've been on this. This is not that surprising. We knew there was a good chance this was going to happen. It's happening. And then after the game, the coach says Bucky Irving earned more playing time. So if he's still available, obviously add him. I don't think he's like a must start or anything, but he's got a pretty high ceiling, especially if Rachaad White misses time, because he is actually a capable receiving back also. Kind of a tough schedule coming up, but man, look after this bot. Look after the bot here for Bucky Irving. We got 7 games against top 12 defenses, and then we got an amazing schedule down the stretch. If you are 3-0, 2-1, maybe you should be buying Bucky Irving. Looking at this playoff schedule again, remember, if you're 0-3, if you're 1-2, you got to trade with that in mind. You got to get into the playoffs. You got to win some weeks. If you have injured players, you got Devontae Smith, you got Trey McBride, you got Sam Laporta, you got Evan Ingram, AJ Brown, Christian McCaffrey. Like some of these guys, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. You got to trade these guys if you're 0-3. You have to, so you can get some wins. It doesn't matter if you have these guys in the playoffs if you didn't make the playoffs. But if you're 3-0, you're 2-1, you should be buying some of those guys. You should be buying Jonathan Brooks. We're going to talk about the Panthers here in a second. But yes, buy Jonathan Brooks at all costs. I regrettably actually sold him in one of my leagues to get Tyreek Hill before last week. We're not feeling good about that. We'll talk about Jonathan Brooks here in a second in the Panthers offense. Excited to talk about that one. But yeah, Bucky Irving, clear takeaway here. Also, I think Mike Evans is a buy. I do think he's actually a really good buy right now. Baker Mayfield looks solid. Chris Godwin has scored a touchdown every game. He has 10 more targets than Mike Evans this season. But they're really going to be comparable players, I think, when we look back at the end of the season, just in terms of targets and yards. Down game here for Mike Evans. Two down games for Mike Evans. But guys, he's out there basically every snap. He's out there basically every single passing play. And he's historically seen really good usage, over 24% of the air yards in all 3 games. Still, this was just a down game against a good offense. He was matched up against a really, really good corner throughout most of this game. I think Mike Evans is a pretty solid buy right now with how Baker's looked, how Godwin has played in comparison to Evans. Same reason Godwin was a good buy in drafts in comparison to Mike Evans, because the cost was so different. Right now, Mike Evans is a good buy in comparison to Godwin because the cost is so different. Whether you're 3-0 or 0-3, I actually think Mike Evans makes a lot of sense. All right, that's all I got for the Buccaneers. Let's go on to the next game. Let's talk about this Panthers game, man. I'm excited to talk about the Panthers offense. I see a lot of people asking about why is everyone hyping up Jonathan Brooks? Jonathan Brooks hasn't even played a game, man. What are we doing? And why aren't we talking about Andy Dalton, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Johnson? I want to talk about them too. But let's start with the Panthers side of the ball here. So, I mean, the biggest takeaway of the week, and this is why it matters for Jonathan Brooks, is the Panthers are a real offense now. They weren't a real offense before, and they're a real offense now. And I was not buying into that, by the way, before week 3. That was an L for me, for sure. I was very skeptical that this offense was going to go from the first overall pick to Andy Dalton and suddenly just, be a real offense again. But they were. This is Dave Canales' 3rd veteran quarterback. He's revived. He revived Baker Mayfield. He revived Geno Smith, and now he's reviving Andy Dalton. And by the way, we get an Andy Dalton revenge game against the Bengals this week, man. That's going to be fun. Andy Dalton ranking ahead of Deshaun Watson, by the way. We'll get to the Browns game, but I mean, you get big time yikes here for Deshaun. Anyways, real offense now with Andy Dalton. I mean, it wasn't like this was an incredible performance, but it was the first 300-yard over 300-yard, 3 TD performance of the season for any quarterback. Yep, that was Andy Dalton. First quarterback to do. I actually think maybe Josh Allen got to 300 yards. I know he threw 3 touchdowns this week, but he was the first quarterback of this season to go over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game. 8.6 yards per attempt. Was not really pushing the ball down the field too aggressively, 5.5. But the completion percentage, 70%. And in the costly plays, he only took 2 sacks, no turnovers. That's exactly what the Panthers needed. Real offense now. That's massive for Deontay Johnson. Adam Thielen got hurt in this game. He's out for at least the next 4 games. Deontay Johnson all of a sudden projecting as a top 30 receiver. He could easily get into the top 20 in the coming weeks. His target share was really strong in this one. Clearly the top receiver for him. 36 routes for Deontay, 14 targets, 38% target share for Deontay Johnson. Scored a touchdown in this one, 124 air yards for Deontay. Like, he's all the way back, man. 26 fantasy points, 8 catches, 122. This is exactly what we thought we were getting with Deontay Johnson when we drafted him. He's all the way back. He is definitely a must start right now, especially with Adam Thielen out. So why do we care about Jonathan Brooks? Well, we care about Jonathan Brooks because he's going to be playing in a real offense now. Because Jonathan Brooks was the first running back taken in this year's NFL draft. And he was by far the best running back in this draft class. Like, it actually, I don't think, was pretty close. The reason he didn't go earlier in the draft was because he was coming off a torn ACL, which he should be fully recovered from. There was a pretty good chance he was actually going to be ready week 1. They played it safe with him, which makes sense. But now he's going to be potentially returning in week 5. We're projecting him right now, Jonathan Brooks, not to have this massive role right out of the gates in week 5 that absolutely is possible. But in the fantasy playoffs, guys, Jonathan Brooks, if he's fully healthy, he's going to win leagues. You look ahead at the playoff schedule to get the Cowboys and Cardinals in the fantasy football playoffs. That should be pretty good game environments and matchups for Jonathan Brooks. We just saw Derrick Henry crush the Cowboys. Jonathan Brooks is a very good receiving back. I think the ceiling for Jonathan Brooks is Todd Gurley's rookie season. And we saw a similar thing with Todd Gurley's rookie season. Didn't play at the beginning because of injury. Came on down the stretch and just won fantasy leagues. I've been thinking about Jonathan Brooks for a more recent comparison. The ceiling for Jonathan Brooks is like a slightly worse version of rookie Saquon Barkley. That's the type of player Jonathan Brooks is. I don't think he's quite what Saquon Barkley is. Maybe 85%, though, potentially, of what Saquon is. That's the ceiling case for Jonathan Brooks. That's a really high ceiling, guys. That is a league-winning ceiling. So, yes, Jonathan Brooks is a strong buy in fantasy football if you can get him, especially for 3-0 and 2-1, and you can wait it out. I was saying all draft season, I think there was a good ceiling, especially with an IR slot for Jonathan Brooks, though those tend to be taken up for all my teams at this point. The IR slot, which is rough. But Jonathan Brooks, don't expect anything from him, really, until the fantasy playoffs. I think that's the way to think about Jonathan Brooks when you're making trades. So if you're on 3, it actually probably does make sense to sell Jonathan Brooks. I think he's got a good league-winning ceiling, but I don't think he's super likely to help you, before the fantasy playoffs. I think that's the right way to play it. They probably will ramp him up slowly. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard, man, is going to be a smash start until he's back. Massive game from Hubbard in a real offense. Now he's actually on over 11 points in 2 straight games. But huge role, 114 yards on the ground, 55 yards, 5 catches through the air. He also scored a receiving touchdown in this one. The routes weren't great here. The snap percentage wasn't great, but the rush share was 68% rush share, clearly ahead of Miles Sanders. Target share actually wasn't bad either with 5 targets. So big up arrow for Chuba Hubbard as well. I do think Xavier Legette, interesting sleeper with Adam Thielen out, but that's what he is. He's a sleeper. He's not a lock. He's not a guy you need to start or even really should start right out of the gates here. Still hasn't played over 60% of the snaps yet. He's really been splitting a role with Jonathan Mingo, which is not really a great vote of confidence for him. He did have a 24% target share week 1. Does have some excitement after the catch ability. At least he did as a prospect. But yeah, really Deontay's the only receiver I think you could possibly trust. And Legette's really only addable in deeper leagues. I'm not even going to add him, I don't think, in a 10-team, maybe even 12-team league. I think 14-team leagues, he's probably addable. All right, that's it for the Panthers side of this game. The Raiders side of this game, we got to talk through too, because there was some benching of Gardner Minshew discussion after this game. It sounds like they're not going to do that yet. Brock Bowers, a bit of a disappointing game. Let's actually pull up Minshew first. Interested to see how his efficiency was here in this one. Yeah, not great. 7.6 yards per attempt is not awful. It's definitely not amazing either. Probably the worst game so far for Minshew. Did throw an interception. Minshew now has an interception in all 3 games. He only took 2 sacks in this one, 15 points, obviously off the fantasy radar, but still, Minshew's still playing well enough to support real fantasy players, which is at least good to see. I thought there was a real risk of that not being the case. And Brock Bowers, only 7 points in this game. Floor game here for Bowers, still 3 catches, 41 yards. Brock Bowers actually is still arguably a top 3 tight end rest of the season. I think he is. Trey McBride's banged up. Sam Laporta's banged up. Travis Kelce's done nothing. I actually think Kelce, it's reasonable to want Kelce more than Bowers. We'll talk about Kelce a little bit later on when we get to the Chiefs game. But only 4 targets, 10% target share for Bowers. That was pretty disappointing. The snap percentage and route participation went down a little bit too, a little bit concerning. But honestly, I think I'm still buying Brock Bowers after these first 2 weeks, after the clear talent profile he has. And this is one of the better floors in fantasy still, guys. 7 points is still like actually a pretty good floor with how the tight ends have played this season. Brock Bowers is still tight end 3 in terms of points, still tight end 4 in terms of yards per out run. I think if you didn't buy Brock Bowers last week behind him, that was actually maybe a decent buy low opportunity for Brock Bowers. Zamir White, guys, borderline droppable. I mean, this is one of the clear do not drafts of the season. Where did all the Zamir White people go, guys? They all went into hiding. Where'd they go? I don't know where they went. I do not know where all the Zamir White people went because they were all definitely in the comment section when I said do not draft Zamir White. I do not know where they are now. Trade Brian Thomas Jr. for Brooks. Yeah, I would do that for sure. Especially if I'm 3-0, especially if I'm not starting Brian Thomas Jr. right now. Jonathan Brooks has much more league-winning ceiling than Brian Thomas Jr. There's not many running backs that have the ceiling case that Jonathan Brooks has. I think it's a great trade to make for sure. Again, we're going to get to more of the comments. Don't worry. Don't go anywhere in the comment section. We're going to get to hundreds of comments in this live later on. All right. Zamir White. I mean, he played 14 snaps in this game. He got a touch on 10 of them. He didn't get a target. He had 10 carries on 14 snaps, which was actually still good for a 63% rush share. What did he do with those 10 carries? 34 yards, 3.4 yards per carry, tied to season high with 3.4 yards per carry against the Carolina Panthers, who are missing their best defender, a defensive tackle. This is the worst run defense in the NFL without their best defensive lineman. And what does Zamir White go out and do? 3.4 yards per carry. Touchdown-dependent running back on an offense led by Gardner Minshew. He's not getting any targets in this game, which he had 6 targets in the previous 2 games, which is also saving him in fantasy a little bit. No touchdowns. Guys, no touchdowns for a touchdown-dependent running back through 3 weeks. Like borderline droppable. 10-man league, droppable for sure. 12-man league, like maybe droppable. I think there's like a real argument that Xavier Legette has a higher ceiling rest of the season than Zamir White, for example. I was just saying he's probably not worth a roster slot. The only reason that he's borderline droppable and not just droppable is like the rush share has still been good. He still is getting the most carries on the team. But other than that, I mean, it's the only positive you could possibly say for Zamir. And Alexander Madison has now stolen 2 touchdowns from him in the last 2 weeks. And has looked better than Zamir White. So who knows if that rush share is even going to stick with how bad Zamir White has played. There was some chatter of Devontae Adams getting traded, after this game. I don't think that's very realistic. Adams only 8 points in this one. He was out there every single snap. Still a solid 9 targets. Still a must start, I think, in fantasy. Breakout game here for Trey Tucker. A lot of this game in garbage time. Was, I'm sure, on the waiver wire in most leagues on some of my dynasty benches. 7 catches, 96 yards, and a TD. He had a season high snap percentage, a season high or tied to season high route participation, 23% target share for him. In the air yards, I feel like there's a ceiling case for Trey Tucker being a Rashid Shaheed type player, but I fear he might be more of like a Calvin Austin type, more of a gadget type of guy. He has maybe occasional spike weeks, but just the floor is so low. But notable game here for sure. He's the wide receiver 8 in week 3. Definitely good for those best ball teams out there. All right, that's all the I got for the Panthers. Raiders, definitely some big Panthers takeaways there. I do think we probably see Aiden O'Connell, by the way, at some point, based on the comments after that game. All right, let's jump to this Giants and Browns game. This one was abysmal, man. I mean, one of the key things I've been looking at every single week is what's going on with Deshaun. Is Deshaun really going to be this bad all season? And, you could explain it away, a little bit with Deshaun through these first 2 games. The Cowboys, they have a good defensive line. They got a lot of pressure. The Jaguars, maybe defense isn't terrible. They got a lot of pressure. In that game too, he let up 6 sacks in week 1, only 2 sacks in week 2. Maybe they're on the upwards trend. He had 15.4 points. He actually had a better fantasy day than his previous 2 games with 16.4 because he threw 2 touchdowns and he had some rushing production again, 26 rushing yards. But man, awful game here for Deshaun. I got such little confidence Deshaun's going to play the whole season at this point. 5.3 yards per attempt. These are Bryce Young type numbers here, guys. 5.3 yards per attempt is in the bottom 10th percentile in the NFL. He also took another 8 sacks in this game against not a very scary Giants defense. I mean, sure, the Giants defensive line's not bad, but they're not amazing either. I mean, we saw other quarterbacks crush the Giants before. Let's pull up the Giants here and see how these other quarterbacks have done against them. I mean, he's actually in line, I guess, a little bit with how Jane Daniels, Sam Darnold. Maybe I'm underrating the Giants defense to some extent here, but I mean, I hope I am because I have way too much of Deshaun Watson on all my best ball teams. Deshaun Watson, guys, he ranks lower than Andy Dalton this week. That's pretty much all I needed to say here. The only positive is the rushing for Deshaun. But, I mean, at this point, I don't have much confidence he's going to play the whole season. A breakout game here for Amari Cooper, big bounce back. I was buying low on him after week 1, and week 2 because the usage was strong. Guys, look at all this green. He's playing every snap. He's running every single route. He has at least 8 targets in all 3 games. The exact type of usage we want to buy. It's not surprising to see him break out in this game. Scored a touchdown in the first play of the game. He ranked wide receiver 5 in this week. Amari Cooper has a really high weekly ceiling. And I think if famous Jameis plays at some point, Jameis Winston plays at some point, that's even going to help Amari Cooper even more. I'll get rid of Pollard. No, I don't think I'd get rid of Pollard. We already talked about that Titans game, but his usage has actually been pretty strong. Spears did play a little bit better than him, though. Amari Cooper, hopefully bought him while you could. I don't think I'm selling Amari Cooper after this game. He's got some great matchups coming up. Not the worst playoff schedule either for Amari Cooper. And the usage has been great, guys. I mean, this is the type of usage I want to buy. We look at some of these underlying stats here. He's been wide receiver 3 now in air yards. Definitely someone that I want to be buying. Jerome Ford, weird usage for Jerome Ford the week before. That just popped right back. I do not know what was going on in this backfield here in week 2, but it got back to normal in week 3. 79% snap percentage, season high for Jerome Ford. The route participation was strong again for Jerome Ford. Only 10 carries, but still 55% rush share, 4 targets. 10 points, a floor game here for Ford. Didn't score a touchdown, but he at least took the role back from Deontay Foreman, who was like kind of nowhere to be found in this game. Only played 11 total snaps. Very strange, usage from week 2 to week 3. Must have been like a matchup thing or an injury thing that just really wasn't reported by the coaching staff. But Ford is clearly the only startable running back in this offense. Down game, I think, here for Judy, 8 points. Still good usage numbers for him, too. I think he's having a much better season than people have realized. Deshaun, though, is really just tanking this whole team. An absolutely embarrassing loss to the Giants after scoring a touchdown literally on the first play of the game after the Giants fumbled the opening kickoff. I think that's it here for the Browns. I guess Akins is a little bit noteworthy. I think he actually did something in this game. He has 6.9 points, 4 catches, 29 yards. It's notable for tight ends when they get a 20% target share, but hopefully we see David Njoku back soon. It sounds like he's unlikely to play in week 4. Maybe he'll be back week 5. Let's actually see really quick. When were we projecting Njoku back? We're projecting back in week 5. I think that's a hopeful week 5. He's back in the top 10 tight end conversation instantly once he returns with how tight ends have been playing. But man, hopefully he comes back soon. Definitely has been good for Amari and Judy to have him out. On the Giants side of the ball, I mean, man, Malik Nabers, the clear guy you want in this offense. We were saying it all offseason. He's a top 10 wide receiver right now in fantasy football. He's actually wide receiver 1 in air yards. He's wide receiver 2 in fantasy points. Guys, his target share, let me put the target share here. The target share is, I think it might be number 1. It probably is number 1 in the NFL. It's number 2. I'm not even sure who would be number 1. I got to look into that, but 38% target share this season for Malik Nabers. He was wide receiver 3 in week 2, wide receiver 4 in week 3. We talked about it on the Sunday morning live. You can't play man coverage against Malik Nabers. Doesn't matter what corner you have. You just can't play man coverage against Malik Nabers. You're going to get absolutely torched. It's exactly what happened in this game. It's going to be interesting to see this matchup against the Cowboys. Not sure exactly how much man coverage they play. Definitely something I'll be looking into. But man zone doesn't matter. He's going to see a huge target share. He went down from a 67% target share, which was obviously unsustainable, which is part of the reason I thought Malik Nabers was a decent sell high, because you can't get a 67% target share every week. Actually, you never get a 67% target share. I've literally never seen target share that big in my entire life. But what does he do? He still gets a 37% target share, and he's efficient on it. He had 127 air yards again. He actually got 2 carries in this game as well. Scored 2 touchdowns, 8 for 78. Absolute stud, top 12 wide receiver rest of the season. Hopefully you didn't sell high like I was recommending. Devin Singletary, good game for him. 18.8 points, scored a touchdown in this one, 4 catches, 43 yards. But actually kind of noteworthy here, the efficiency wasn't great, 4.1 yards per carry. And Tyrone Tracy was actually the most involved he's been. Deeper leagues, Tyrone Tracy, I think, is worth an add. It definitely makes sense to me if the Giants continue to suck, throughout the rest of the season, that we see Tyrone Tracy get more and more run, especially down the stretch in the fantasy football playoffs, which is definitely notable. He had 5 carries. That was a career high, season high for him. Played the most snaps of the season and career in this one. Ran 10 routes that matched the season high, career high, 2 catches, 17 yards. Nothing super exciting, but definitely notable increase in usage for Tyrone Tracy. Could see him being relevant in the fantasy playoffs for sure. Wan'Dale Robinson continued to be in this unexciting role. Good usage, underlying usage if you just look at receptions and targets, but it doesn't matter because he's getting no air yards. I mean, the least exciting targets that you could possibly get in the NFL. He only had 8% of the air yards in this game, guys. 24% target share, but 8% of the area. It defines him exactly. You have tons of Wandale types out there. Elijah Moore. I think we talked about a Wandale type, Demario Douglas earlier in the live as well. All right, moving on to the next game. Let me know in the comments, guys, which games you want me to do next. We're going to go through every single game. Let's talk about this Bears-Colts game. And man, this was one of the worst games I've ever watched, I think. One of the worst games that I've ever watched in my life. We got to go to the Bears first. Let's start with the Bears side of the ball here. The Bears somehow lost this game. I'm really not sure how they lost. It really was the 2 interceptions, the 1 fumble, and the 4 sacks for the offense. This offensive line looks terrible. The coaching staff has looked exposed really through the first 3 games. They look totally unprepared to run a reasonable offense with Caleb Williams. I actually think Caleb Williams is like kind of an interesting buy low, especially in Dynasty through 3 games. He actually has done some good things. He actually, I think, led the week in passing yards with 363. He threw 2 touchdowns in this game. He's got to limit the turnovers a little bit, but he actually has had some good moments so far this season. He had 19 fantasy points for this one. Yeah, we're panicking on Mondre. We already got to that. But yeah, I'm pretty fully panicked on Mondre in a horrible offense where Antonio Gibson's played better than him for 2 consecutive weeks now. But yeah, Caleb Williams, I do think is actually should be on rostered in every single league. And in Dynasty leagues, I think he's like a clear buy. I would be buying him as much as possible in Dynasty. Right now, I think there's still a really high ceiling. He's not going to be behind this horrible offensive line with a horrible coaching staff his whole career. Maybe not even the whole season. From the wide receivers, DJ Moore usage continues to look good. This is actually his best fantasy day of the season. 8 catches, 78 yards. He's out there every single snap, every single passing play. He's got at least 8 targets in every single game. Really strong floor here for DJ Moore, and we have not seen the ceiling yet for DJ Moore. Keenan Allen did not play in this one, though, and it was a breakout game for Rome Odunze. He actually had the best fantasy day of all the receivers. 6 catches, 112, and a touchdown. Finally, didn't have a game over 5.5 points prior to this. It does put him on the flex radar for sure. Not a bad flex option. He had 11 targets. Again, though, Keenan Allen did not play in this game, but he was seeing deep targets, 45% of the air yards. For Rome Odunze, super encouraging for him. He had a carry in this game, too. I think Rome Odunze is definitely startable at this point, but with Keenan Allen back, that'll be interesting. The other note here for the Bears is Cole Kmet. Definitely a noteworthy game here for Kmet with the tight end landscape as it is. We still only have Kmet ranked as tight end 19 in week 4. Definitely a chance that rises a little bit as we look more into these numbers, update the projections here for week 4. But he had 10 catches, 97 yards. I actually think if you go to the summary tab here, yeah, he's tight end 4 now on the season. All it takes is one big game. Your top 5 tight end in points for this season at tight end. But Cole Kmet, noteworthy usage increase here. He went from a 50% snap percentage in week 1. He ran less routes than Gerald Everett in week 1. Not the case in week 2. Not the case in week 3. He's seeing his snap percentage, his route participation increase. He should be rostered in every league, guys, with the current landscape of tight ends for sure. Should be rostered in every league. 23% target share. Again, Keenan Allen was out in this game, and I think Keenan's going to be back this week. So you got to take some of this receiver data with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, you gotta feel pretty good about this game from Cole Kmet. He's at least worth considering starting in tougher tight end spots. We were talking earlier before this live, him versus Freiermuth. I think I lean Kmet over Freiermuth. Him versus Zach Ertz. I think it's reasonable to lean Kmet there too. At least we've seen a true ceiling here for Kmet. He gets a good matchup versus the Rams this week too. I think Ertz has a decent floor. Doesn't have offer the same ceiling though as Kmet. I think that's a floor ceiling decision there a bit. There. Also notable in this game for the Bears. Last thing here for the Bears. Roschon Johnson, actually second last thing. Roschon Johnson is addable. He's actually a pretty good add, I think, especially in deeper leagues. Roschon Johnson didn't play in week 1, didn't play in week 2, and then suddenly was ahead of Khalil Herbert in week 3. Pretty curious, coaching here. All of a sudden he goes from inactive to running back 2. He's a guy I actually took in a bunch of best ball leagues because he's a good pass catcher, which is why he's worth an add. He had 4 catches, 32 yards in this one. He's also big enough size-wise to be a goal line back. So he has a path to be the goal line back and a receiving back in this offense. The offensive line is trash, so it kind of limits his ceiling. But he had 8 carries, 30% of the carries. He also had a 10% target share in this one and 3.8 yards per carry. And the reason it's really notable is the last point about this game is Swift is full panic for sure on DeAndre Swift. He's been terrible. He's borderline droppable, similar to Zamir White. You can't drop him really because the usage has not been awful, over 50% of the carries. He saw his rush share, though, go down in this one. And again, look at these yards per carry numbers, guys. This is even worse than Zamir White. Zamir White doesn't have a game over 3 yards per carry. At least DeAndre Swift has done that once. But DeAndre Swift, guys, 1.5 yards per carry in this game. Guys, he's getting the ball and just laying down. What is he doing? It's really not even just Swift. Swift has not played well. He's done nothing to break tackles and make something out of nothing. But he has had nothing, to be fair. The offensive line has been abysmal. Part of the reason that it's hard to get too excited about the ceiling For Roschon, again, in deeper leagues, though, I do think he's worth an add because they just cannot keep handing the ball to DeAndre Swift, getting 1.5 yards per carry. I mean, just completely abysmal. And he actually had, I think, the same amount of targets that Roschon Johnson had. So definitely a path here to Roschon Johnson being somewhat relevant in fantasy, and it could happen as soon as this next week. So that's definitely notable. And Swift is absolutely not startable. In 10-team leagues, I think I would just straight up drop DeAndre Swift. All right, the other side of this game, the team that somehow won this game after Anthony Richardson, guys, he ranks outside the top 20 quarterbacks now in week 4. Anthony Richardson is not a startable player in fantasy. He does have the 5th most rushing yards per game still this season among quarterbacks. That's the only positive for Anthony Richardson. He almost scored a rushing touchdown in this one, which would have saved his game. But he's back-to-back games now under 13 points. He has looked horrible throwing the ball. Guys, he has 6 interceptions in 3 games for Anthony Richardson. Some of these interceptions have looked awful. I actually think one of those interceptions in week 2 was just a Hail Mary. So, that's like skewing this a tiny bit. But man, some of these interceptions have been fully on Anthony Richardson. Terrible throws. And then you look at some of the other underlying numbers, 50% completion percentage. Guys, he has not completed more than half his passes in a single game this season. He's just totally inaccurate. He's pushing the ball downfield. He has a good ceiling because of that. Josh Downs looked okay in his first game back, but half his passes are not catchable. I mean, it's awful. He's got one of the lowest catchable target rates in the league. So really tough to trust his ceiling, especially in this matchup against the Steelers. The Steelers have been a really, really rough matchup this season across all positions. Guys, the Steelers haven't allowed more 10 points in a game, just a game in general, not fantasy points, real NFL points. They haven't allowed more than 10 real NFL points in a game. Kirk Cousins only had 8 points. Bo Nix only had 10 points. Justin Herbert only had 9 points last week. Anthony Richardson really can't be started this week. He's not droppable because the ceiling is still there. But Anthony Richardson right now is looking like the worst quarterback pick in all of fantasy football at cost right now. So through 3 weeks. So rough start for A-Rich. He's got to figure out the accuracy concerns before being startable. My bold take of Jayden Daniels over A-Rich is aging incredibly well. I did not think through 3 weeks it was going to be so obvious that you'd rather have Jayden Daniels than Anthony Richardson. We're going to get to the why I'm buying Travis Kelce a little bit later on. But Jonathan Taylor, he's looking like a league winner, at least. Definitely a big positive from this game. Top 5 running back here in week 3. He's now been over 10 points all 3 games. Strong floor, strong ceiling, back-to-back games over 100 yards. I mean, really, this was the difference, honestly, for the Colts and why they won the game is, I was saying it, what was going on in week 2? I mean, they really should have won in week 2 also against Malik Willis, and they didn't because they only gave Jonathan Taylor 12 carries when he was averaging 8.6 yards per carry. And they changed that here in week 3, giving us a season high 23 carries, still a strong 4.8 yards per carry against a pretty good Bears defense in this game. Jonathan Taylor, obviously locked and loaded. A good guy to have on your team and buy high on if you can. For the Colts, so let's also look at the receivers here because these receivers are so tough to start right now in fantasy with Anthony Richardson only completing half his passes or less in every single game. Floor games, 3 straight weeks here for Michael Pittman, under 8 points in all 3 games. The volume, target share wise hasn't been bad. He's been over 20% target share all 3 weeks, but it's not going to matter if half those targets aren't catchable. That's the concern here for Pittman on a run for his team too. This team's just going to continue to skew really run heavy if A-Rich can't figure it out passing the ball. And then Josh Downs definitely should be rostered in all leagues. He might end up leading this team in target share the rest of the season. Absolutely possible. Guys, he comes in week 1, first week back, 28% target share for Downs, despite only playing 57% of snaps. Downs is a must add. He definitely needs to be rostered in all leagues. I almost think it's not that unreasonable to like Downs more than Pittman rest of season. Just with his first game back, coming off the injury, they eased him in snap-wise, but he saw 28% of the targets. The air yards weren't great. A little bit of a Wandale role here, so I guess I'll scale that comment back a little bit. I still probably prefer Pittman by a decent amount, just looking at these air yards here. But still, nonetheless, 28% target share for Downs first game back on barely playing more than half the snaps is very encouraging for him, but still all the same concerns here for Downs when it comes to Anthony Richardson. Also feeling pretty good about Adonai Mitchell being on my do not draft list. The guy played 2 snaps? I think he played 7 snaps. He ran 2 routes. He was the guy that was phased out. Alec Pierce stayed in. Adonai Mitchell came out. Droppable. He's droppable. He has all of the same issues with Anthony Richardson being the quarterback accuracy-wise, and he's not even playing because he's getting squeezed out with Josh Downs back. I mean, clearly Josh Downs is well ahead of him in the depth chart, and then Alec Pierce is the preferred guy in the wind sprint role. I know Alec Pierce hasn't necessarily been running wind sprints this season. I actually think Alec Pierce might have actually led this team again in fantasy points. I think he did. Maybe Downs had him. I think Pittman had actually a little bit more than this. Still leads the team in points this season. He only had 1 catch, 44 yards in his wind sprint roll. Guys, if you're just joining the YouTube live, guys, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching live on TikTok, hit the follow button. Roshan Johnson, RB1. No, Roshan Johnson is not RB1. Roshan Johnson is an ad that you cannot start yet, but at least has a path to a decent receiving role and potentially goal line role, but behind a bad offensive line. Same issues as DeAndre Swift has to some extent, though he was more efficient than DeAndre Swift. We just talked about the Bears. We just talked about the Colts. Let's move on to the next game here. Let's talk about this Texans-Vikings game. Let's start with the Texans. I think this Vikings defense is actually pretty good. I actually think I talked about this last week. I thought initially that maybe this Vikings defense was a good one to target, just based on, I think they played the Giants here in week 2. Yeah, week 1. No quarterback's done well yet against the Vikings. I think they have a lot of sacks too. Yeah, look, they have at least 5 sacks in every game. This Vikings defensive line is good. And they've also forced 5 interceptions, at least 5 sacks and 5 total interceptions for the Vikings. Because the Vikings defense is actually good this season. We were wrong about that heading into the season. Stroud definitely showed up in this game too. And Stroud threw 2 picks in this one. Down game for Stroud, only 12 points. His air yards per attempt was abysmal, not pushing down the ball down the field. Honestly, these air yards per attempt is pretty concerning just in general for him through 3 games, not over 7.5 air yards per attempt in a single game. Stroud also looking like one of the worst picks it cost in fantasy. He was picked way too early, getting picked before, well before in some drafts, Kyler Murray, getting picked before Jayden Daniels, well before Jayden Daniels, by the way, the late round quarterback you wanted in fantasy pretty clearly. We were on that at least during draft season. But yeah, down game, 58% completion percentage for 65% completion percentage, but only 6.9 yards per attempt. Not great for Stroud. He did throw 1 touchdown in this game. Nico Collins continues to be the wide receiver you want, ranks as a top 8 wide receiver here in week 14. 4 catches, 86 yards. For him, 23% target share is his lowest of the season, but another receiver here over 23% all 3 games. Air yard percentage was really strong still. I think I think Diggs was the one, I think, with a touchdown in this game. No, he didn't score the touchdown, but 10 catches, 94 yards for Steph Diggs, 36% air yard share. It does feel like Tank Dell's the guy getting squeezed out here a bit between Steph Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. I actually still think Tank Dell's an interesting buy low, especially if you're a 3-0 team and you could wait a little bit for Tank to pick up, because guys, you got to consider the full context with Tank Dell. He picked up a little bit of an injury before the season. Then he literally got shot before the season and was able to recover from that. He's now off to a slow start. They say he's a little banged up after this game too, I believe. They said he's banged up, dealing with soreness ahead of week 4. Like really rough like a risky flex start. He did have 5 catches, 62 yards. It wasn't his best game actually of the season here for Tank, but he is the guy getting squeezed out, playing the least snaps, getting the least targets in this offense. Only 14% target share, not too exciting here for Tank, but I still like the ceiling for Tank down the stretch. I do still like the ceiling for Tank down the stretch, and they do have kind of an intriguing playoff schedule here too against the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens. 3 potential shootouts for the Texans. Last note here, Cam Akers was in a workhorse role. 43% of the snaps, actually not really a workhorse role. I think the rush share, though, 64% rush share, only 9 carries, though, because they were playing behind the whole time. Did save his day with a receiving touchdown, caught a touchdown for 8 yards. Didn't even crack 10 points, though. Not the best start. I do think Mixon's back this week. Even if Mixon's not back this week, I don't feel as great about Akers this week as I did last week. All right, let's get to the other side of this game, the Minnesota Vikings, who are balling. The Minnesota Vikings are absolutely balling right now. They get an interesting revenge spot for a lot of their guys here in week 4 against the Green Bay Packers. Ooh, I spelled Vikings wrong. We're live on TikTok and YouTube right now, by the way. We're going to get to hundreds of comments in the YouTube and TikTok live, but if you're watching live on TikTok, guys, come to the YouTube live. It's a better viewing experience. You can see I'm sharing my screen on the YouTube live, talking through all the data we're talking through on this live about every single game. And also, this live stream is going to be up on the YouTube live, on the YouTube account after the live. It's going to be time stamped where we're talking about every single game. So you can also go through every single game on your own speed, own time after the live. If you don't catch the whole thing. All right. Jettas, wide receiver 1 here in week 4. He's been, I think, the wide receiver 1. He's a wide receiver 7 this season, but he's been like definitely looking like the wide receiver 1 through 3 games. I think we still have CeeDee Lamb technically ranked ahead of him, but there's a real argument Jettas would be the first overall pick in fantasy drafts if they were happening today. 32% target share, highest of the season for Justin Jefferson. Not much to talk about there. He's just doing what Justin Jefferson does. Sam Darnold, though, is looking like a real start of a quarterback in fantasy. He's now been top 15 all 3 weeks. He was a top 10 quarterback back-to-back weeks, over 20 points in both these games. Interesting spot for him against the Packers. They did just look pretty good against the Titans, so I'm not sure if that means that much. He does have 8 touchdowns now through 3 games. Sam Darnold, 8 touchdowns, 3 games. Pretty crazy stuff. His yards per attempt in this one weren't great. His air yards per attempt, again, were not that great. But they, I think, leaned on the run a lot in this one. A lot of dump offs to Aaron Jones in this one, too, which were pretty effective. Aaron Jones looking like a smash start in this revenge game against the Packers. 26 points for Aaron Jones last week. He had 102 rushing yards, also had 5 catches, 46, and a touchdown through the air. Strong rush share, strong target share, 68% rush share, 24% target share for Aaron Jones. Guys, that's elite. That's an elite workload. Top 12 running back type of stuff here for Aaron Jones. If he can maintain this type of workload, we have never seen Aaron Jones see this type of workload for a sustainable stretch. It's possible in this offense that we do see them push it to the limit here with Aaron Jones, and that's going to make him a great fantasy asset. Definitely feeling good if you have Aaron Jones. We've seen the floor of 10 points, ceiling 26 points now for Aaron Jones. Jordan Addison was out again in this one, and Jalen Heather scored another touchdown. Not a bad flex play. I actually had him in one of my deeper leagues in this one. Only 3 catches, but scored his 3rd straight game with a touchdown. He's going to be on the flex radar for this season, depending on how long Jordan Addison is out. Also noteworthy, I'm buying TJ Hockenson, like big time buying TJ Hockenson right now. If I'm 3-0 or 2-1, buy TJ Hockenson. He could come back pretty soon. The week 6 bye is only three weeks away now. And I think he's going to come back. That's when we're projecting him back after that week 6 bye. It possibly comes back sooner than that. It's possibly comes back later than that, but I feel very confident he'll be back for the playoffs, and he's got a pretty good schedule down the stretch in the playoffs. He could be tight end 1, guys, Hockenson, without the tight ends have played once he comes back. So if you're really struggling at tight end and you need some sort of backup plan, I do like Hockenson as the backup plan there. All right, that's enough for the Texans-Vikings game. Really excited for that Aaron Jones revenge game here in week 4. Eagles and Saints. This is another like really, really low-scoring game. My Olave, Shaheed, Carr stack in DFS definitely did not pay off this week. I think the most notable thing from the Saints side of the ball, though, was Alvin Kamara's workload. I mean, my God, he only had 16 points in this one. Now is actually his worst fantasy game of the season. Still finishes running back 15 on the week. But my God, he had 86% snap percentage. He had 90% of the carries for the Saints in this game, 26 carries for Alvin Kamara. I mean, we really have not seen very many games like this for Alvin Kamara. These might have been some career high numbers in terms of usage for Alvin Kamara. He still had 3 targets, 13% target share, was actually kind of down for him in the efficiency. I don't think he even was that great. Yeah, 3.3 yards per carry, but the volume was massive enough to have a pretty solid floor game here against the Eagles. He is projecting as a top 5 running back rest of season with this type of usage. Derek Carr down game. They also lost their center in this game. I think he's out for at least the next 6 to 8 weeks. That's not good for the Saints offense. Definitely something to monitor. I hope you bought Chris Olave and started Chris Olave. He finishes wide receiver 10 on the week, 6 catches, 86 yards and TD. The usage has been great, guys, for Chris Olave. He was a clear buy after week 2 with 40% target share, 26% target share here in week 3. He remains a must start in fantasy. 44% of the air yards at least in each of the last 2 games. Really strong usage numbers from Olave. He's the wide receiver you want in this game. I also think Rashid Shaheed is a buy right now in fantasy, a very sneaky buy, because there's this narrative out there about Rashid Shaheed. He's this boom bust guy. He's just going to catch the long pass, or he's not. And that's definitely reasonable to some extent. It's reasonable to some extent, I think. But that's a lot more valuable than most players that I think are being like compared to Rashid Shaheed in terms of rankings right now. And he's going to have some big target share games. He's been over 20% target share, guys, in all 3 games. There was only 2 games last year where Rashid Shaheed was over a 20% target share. He's now done it in 3 straight. There was not a 3-game stretch in Rashid Shaheed's career where he's seen this type of volume. So sure, he's going to be a little bit boom bust. He's going to catch some deep passes, or he's not. But these air yard numbers are really strong, guys. He's had over 45% of the Saints' air yards in all 3 games. He's got a really, really high ceiling. I mean, we've already seen it twice. And he's coming off a donut. He did have some deep targets in this game that he didn't connect on. But I don't think that like a 0-point floor is going to be super common for Rashid Shaheed. And the ceiling I actually think is even higher than what we saw in week 1, in week 2, where he was already a top 15 receiver. I think Rashid Shaheed is a very sneaky buy low after a donut here in week 3. If people are scared to start him now moving forward, I don't think he's a scary flex start. Like Rashid Shaheed versus Tank Dell, for example. I don't think it's crazy to think Rashid Shaheed's the better flex option, at least right now. I think that's pretty much it here for the Saints. I mean, Juwan Johnson has been eased back. He's not startable. He probably can be dropped, but I also think his workload could increase following the week 12 bye, and he could be noteworthy again, but he's not really playing even in a full-time role. Eagles, the Saints lost this game somehow. I mean, I think they had like a critical play where they threw it to Jamal Williams in the flat. I don't know that type of play call is I think Jamal Williams had multiple targets in this game for some reason. Jalen Hurts, down game for him here against the Saints, only 12 points. He's now been under 20 points twice this season, not really looking like the early fantasy pick you wanted him to be. Obviously, A.J. Brown is hurt. Devontae Smith got hurt in this game. Do not think Devontae Smith plays this week, especially with the bye here in week 5. I think plan for Devontae Smith to be out. Jalen Hurts had 6.2 air yards per attempt. Not very exciting, this one. 8.2 yards per attempt, not bad. 76% completion percentage, not bad. He did run a little bit as well. He had 25 rushing yards, 8 rushing attempts. He had over 30% rush share now in 3 straight games. That is at least encouraging for Jalen Hurts. Some of those are tush pushes, bringing down his yards per carry a bit. But, big time floor game here for Jalen Hurts. Still a must start, I think, in fantasy, though, with all these weapons out. A.J. Brown out, Devontae Smith out. Sutton's going to run through Hurts, Saquon, and none other than Dallas Goedert, who is the clear tight end 1 here in week 3. Massive game. I think one of the best games, I think the best game of Dallas Goedert's career here. 27 points, 10 catches, 170. He was the tight end you really, really wanted in fantasy for sure. He's going to be the number 1 tight end projected for week 4. He is our number 1 tight end here in week 4 because Devontae Smith is out. A.J. Brown is out. I mean, he's just locked into a significant target share. He had a 30% target share last week. There's very few tight ends that can get to a 30% target share right now in the NFL, especially with McBride and Laporta right now projected as out. Evan Ingram right now projected as out in week 4. So, it's a bleak tight end world out there unless you have Dallas Goedert. At least you got some hope. Pretty decent matchup here in week 4 against the Bucs. Actually, the Bucs have been good against tight ends, but they played no tight ends. They played absolutely no tight ends this season. So that's also notable. Dotson, I don't think did much here. Yeah, 2.8 points. He at least was out there almost every snap. That's it, though. Win sprints here for Dotson. Win sprints for Dotson. Also, I think this Covey guy, he's out. He had a significant target share. I don't know if he's even in here. It doesn't look like he is, but let's see. I don't think he's in the start sit tool because he probably doesn't have a projection. But he had a decent target share in this game. He's now on IR, I think, as well. All right, on to the next game here. Let's talk through this Chargers-Steelers game. We're talking about the Chiefs here coming up in a second. We'll talk about why I'm buying Travis Kelce pretty hard. Then we're going to get to some comments, guys. Don't worry. We're going to get to the comments. Let's go to the Chargers, though, here. They made a mistake putting Justin Herbert out there. Sometimes in the NFL, you got to protect players from themselves, and the Chargers did not do that in this game. They put Justin Herbert out there with a high ankle sprain, and he re-injured it. I did not expect Justin Herbert to play this week. We're not projecting him in this week in the Walter Picks app. They got the week 5 bye coming up, too, right after this week, so almost no chance that they risk it with Justin Herbert in this game. Maybe they use the other order of that logic, and they're like, we get the bye coming up, so let's risk it. But they're going to lose against the Chiefs anyway, if we're being honest. The Chiefs are going to be somehow luckily 4-0 in a week from now, and the Chargers are probably going to be on the losing side of this game without Justin Herbert. This is going to be a cakewalk here for the Chiefs. There's almost no chance. I think it's Easton Stick who we saw come in. Yeah, Heineke actually was the one that came in, I think. But neither of these guys can sustain a real offense in the NFL. So Herbert gets hurt in this one. So not many major takeaways here. Quentin Johnston, I think, scored again. Yeah, he did. He's got 3 touchdowns through 3 games. He needs to be rostered in all leagues. Maybe he needs just some time, guys, to develop. This is maybe a true year 2 breakout, post-hype sleeper here for Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston, I think, is what we wanted Treylon Burks to be. Ladd McConkey, I think, actually was looking decent with Herbert in the game. 31% target share here for Ladd McConkey, encouraging, but Herbert got hurt, so you can't really start him in fantasy right now. Last note here for the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins continued to get much work than I ever thought was going to be possible. 15 carries in this game. He also had a 15% target share with 3 targets for J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins is a really good player to have in fantasy right now with this type of usage. He saw 75% of the carries in this game. He's clearly well ahead of Gus Edwards, only 2.9 yards per carry. The Steelers are just a really tough matchup, guys. Really, really tough matchup for running backs. I think the Chiefs are also a pretty tough matchup for running backs. No running back over 13.5 points. Bijan only at 13.2, so a little scary matchup here for Dobbins again. I think Dobbins is kind of an interesting buy low, maybe after this week, especially if he goes under 10 points twice with this type of usage that he is seeing. I think Hayden Hurst, really quick note on him because of the tight ends. You do want to look deeper into some of these tight ends. Yeah, nothing really noteworthy of Hayden Hurst. Not worth a roster spot. I actually think it was Disley. Maybe that's the tight end that's been the preferred pass catching tight end. Yeah, 4.9 points. The target shares aren't terrible, but yeah, not a guy you can really roster either. Other side of the ball, here we are in week 4. Justin Fields is 3-0. Justin Fields projecting his QB9 now in week 4. Like, if you need a quarterback, if you had Anthony Richardson, or you had Deshaun Watson, maybe, or Trevor Lawrence, maybe, who they said Mac Jones, maybe he's going to get some run this season. Man, that'd be a bleak world for the Jaguars. But Justin Fields, best game of the season here, 19 fantasy points in this one, 245 passing yards. He actually passed pretty effectively in this one, 7.7 yards per attempt. Still wasn't pushing the ball down the field much, but 78% completion percentage. He had another game with at least 19% rush share. His yards per carry, I think, shot up in this one too, which was down a bit. Actually, only one yards per carry. I'm not sure that's actually even accurate. Yeah, he actually only had six rushing yards, despite the rush share. Some of those were kneels, I think, here too. The yards per carry has been down for Fields. I do think that it's probably likely to rebound, but the passing is pretty exciting because that might give Fields like a real ceiling. And this is a good matchup here against the Colts, who lost to Malik Willis the week before. This is like a better version of Malik Willis, I think, as good as Malik Willis played, last week. Fields is definitely startable here in week 4. Projected as a top 12 quarterback for the next 3 weeks. Not the worst ad if you're in need of a quarterback with Justin Fields. But the main takeaway from this game, Jaylen Warren got hurt. Now, actually left a little banged up in a sling, but this was another really encouraging usage for game for Najee Harris. He still has not scored a touchdown this season. I think that almost definitely changes here in week 4, especially with Warren unlikely to play. Warren is not going to play in this game. He had at least 17 carries now, Najee, in all 3 games. He had a game over 2 targets, 16% target share. That was the season high with 5 targets. He had only 60% of the carries. That could be even higher next week. Cordell Patterson's going to mix in. Obviously, Fields is going to steal some rushing too, but snap percentage was a season high with Warren getting banged up. He's a volume-based top 15 running back here in week 4 in a good matchup against the Colts. We saw Josh Jacobs pop off against the Colts. We saw Joe Mixon pop off. Both these guys went over 150 rushing yards. Now he's in a great spot here in week 4. And I think Jaylen Warren in deeper leagues, like 14-plus team leagues, worth holding on to, but in 12-team leagues or less, I think you can consider dropping Jaylen Warren. And then last but not least, these receivers continue to be pretty much unstartable in fantasy. Only 10 points for Pickens, 5 catches, 57 yards. The target share is going to look fine. The air yard share is going to look fine. It doesn't matter if they're not throwing the ball a lot. This team, in this overall team environment that they create because their defense is so good and they lean so much on the run through the quarterback and through Najee, just not an exciting offense for fantasy for any of these receivers. Pickens is the only one you could possibly consider starting, and I really don't get too excited starting him. Like Rashid Shaheed versus Pickens, it might be Rashid Shaheed, guys. He might actually have a higher ceiling just with how much the Saints are passing versus how much the Steelers are passing. Remember, not all target shares are created equal. Guys, smash the like button if you're watching live on YouTube. I think we're over halfway through the games now, but we're just getting started, man. We still got hundreds of comments to get to. I'm having a blast going through these games. So many big takeaways here from these games. We haven't even gotten to some of the most exciting games. Before we get to some of the exciting games, let's talk about probably the least exciting game of the week here between the Dolphins and the Seahawks. I mean, absolute abysmal stuff here from the Dolphins. And as much as you want to blame Skylar Thompson, I really do think I really do think Mike McDaniel, I was going to call him Josh McDaniels, Mike McDaniel deserves some of the heat for this game. First of all, he's the one who chose the backup quarterback. He chose Skylar Thompson over Mike White. I think that was a horrible decision. And second of all, what was this game plan, man? I mean, they didn't hand the ball off at all to Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. I think they just did a really bad job setting their best players up for success in this game, and it definitely showed. This was a down game for Achane. I thought Achane was locked in for 20-plus touches in this game, but you can't get 20-plus touches to anyone if you're not getting any first downs, and that was the case here in this one. He still actually came kind of close because he had 11 rushing attempts, and he had 3 catches, so 14 total touches. I think he had 5 targets, though, so he almost had 16 total touches. He wasn't that far off from 20, but still not the game we saw from him last week. He did play his high snap percentage, I think, of his career here with 74% of the snaps. I do think Mostert's back next week, which is definitely not great for Achane. Still, obviously, a must-start player, but I think the ceiling and floor is just a little bit lower for Achane with Mostert coming back and with the dysfunctional offense. Skylar Thompson also got banged up because he took so many sacks in this one. Let me pull up Skylar Thompson here because, I mean, this was a gross offense. He had 5 sacks in this game, no interceptions, but was under constant duress. He was at, what was this? 5.6 yards per attempt, only 4.3 air yards per attempt, completely dumbed down offense. Didn't even score 5 fantasy points for Skylar Thompson. I actually think Tyreek Hill is a very good buy right now in fantasy football. I am buying Tyreek Hill in fantasy right now. You got to think the Tyreek owner in your league is panicked about this offense right now. Tyreek Hill, especially, again, for the teams that are 3-0, the teams that are 2-1. Thanks for the subscription, Keyshawn, in the TikTok live. We will get to TikTok live subscriber only comment mode here in like the next 30 minutes probably or so as we get to the end of these games. But Tyreek Hill, first of all, a floor of 7 points in this bad of a game that we've seen his floor of really the last 2 games. This is Tyreek Hill's floor. I still don't think we've seen his true ceiling yet. We saw it a bit in week 1 where he almost had an even bigger game there in week 1. But the real reason I'm buying Tyreek is it does seem likely at this point that Tua is going to come back at some point after the bye. That's still, an assumption that you got to make if you're buying into Tyreek Hill. But I think you can buy low on him pretty easily right now. And if someone's 0-3 or 1-2 and they have Tyreek, like they kind of have to sell him a little bit right now and panic sell him. I think you get it really low. And we still haven't projected as, look at this, a top 10 wide receiver, like for most of the rest of the weeks and all the weeks in the fantasy playoffs against the Texans, the 49ers, and the Browns. He's a top 6 wide receiver projected right now, assuming Tua's back. So yeah, I'd like buying low on him a lot. I'm definitely a little more skittish on Jalen Waddle. I think he's a little bit less systemic proof, with the systemic risk here. But a similar reason, I think it's not that unreasonable to buy low on Jalen Waddle either if you think Tua is going to return. But both guys, I don't think you can start really Waddle right now. I still think Tyreek is a must start in almost all situations. That's it for the Dolphins. Again, Mostert's going to be back. Jalen Wright did get some run in this one again. Another disappointing game for Jalen Wright, just quickly touching on this. He actually, I think, was out there the first play of the game, but only played 21% of the snaps, 2 carries, did nothing. I think with his 2 carries, let me go to the efficiency here. He actually did have 8.5 yards per carry. He had 17 rushing yards. Maybe they should have gotten the ball a bit more. Nonetheless, the usage was unexciting. It doesn't seem like there's any real league-winning ceiling here for Jalen Wright, unless Etienne, Mostert, and Jeff Wilson all get injuries. Then maybe there's a path for Jalen Wright. He does not need to be rostered. He can be dropped for sure in leagues. And then on the Seahawks side of the ball, really encouraging game here for the Seahawks. I mean, the defense obviously crushed. DK Metcalf played great again. Geno Smith looked decent, 8.5 yards per attempt. Not a super exciting, aggressive game, but he didn't need to be in this game where the Dolphins could not move the ball at all. The real storyline here for this offense was Zach Charbonnet, who is a smash start, one of the better plays for me of the week. Definitely glad I got a lot of people to start him. He scored 2 touchdowns in this one, 91 yards on the ground. Just massive role for he's in a true workhorse role when Kenneth is out. He's one of these league-winning handcuffs. He's a league-winning handcuff. That's exactly what Zach Charbonnet is. That's exactly what I think Braelon Allen is. It's exactly what Jordan Mason is. These guys that one guy goes down and all of a sudden they're getting 80% plus of the workhorse role, league-winning running backs, 18 carries here for Char, but also he's got in a real receiving role, over a 10% target share now in every single game, over 12 fantasy points in every single game. That week 1 is a game where Kenneth played too. So he's got standalone value. He's got league-winning ceiling. Zach Sharp was a great pick in fantasy. I do think Kenneth Walker comes back this week. So Sharp's probably not startable. A great start. Still some standalone value, though, with how well he played. You do have to wonder, be a little bit scared for Kenneth. What's Kenneth's role going to be back when he comes back? I feel like Sharp has probably earned this being somewhat more of a split backfield than it was even in week 1. Week 1, he only ran around 26% of the passing plays, only played 34% of snaps. This could easily be close to 50%, kind of lowering the ceiling and floor for both guys. So that's definitely concerning and noteworthy here. Metcalf, another really strong game. He projects super well. He's our wide receiver 7 right now in our week 4 projections against the Lions, who just got smoked by Marvin Harrison Jr. He has over 100 yards and a touchdown again. Only 4 catches in this one. Didn't matter because he had over 50% of the air yards in this game. Only an 18% target share. Again, didn't matter because he was efficient with those targets. He's mossing people out there. Metcalf looks like he's in prime form. Over 20 points in back-to-back games. Must start every single week. We have him projected for 75 receiving yards right now against the Lions. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he came back down to earth a little bit. Disappointing game for him. I thought he was going to have a better game, but it wasn't a game where they had to throw the ball a lot. I am still buying into the week 2 performance from JSN, where he had a 37% target share, only 9% here. In week 3, I think he could also pop off, though, against the Lions. We are projecting him as a top 20 receiver still in week 4. Tyler Lockett, not a bad game from him. 9.6 points, 5 catches, 46 yards. I think he actually had a better target share. Yeah, significantly better target share here than JSN. Still would prefer JSN over Lockett rest of the season, but Lockett isn't the worst flex play right now. Nabers for JT, I would take JT over Nabers rest of the season for sure. There's not very many running backs that are getting workhorse usage. JT is one of them. Saquon's one of them. Bijan's one of them. Brees isn't really one of them, but he's still ranked so high because of his efficiency and his pass catching. But all those guys are pretty rare. Kamara is one of them. These guys are guys that I want to trade for aggressively because there's just not very many running backs with that type of role in today's NFL. Saquon, obviously one of them. That's it for the Seahawks. Oh, Noah Fant, real quick here. He was the tight end 6 this week with 12 points, 6 catches, 60 yards. Anytime, though, a tight end can finish top 10 and not score a touchdown, I do think that's pretty noteworthy. Noah Fant, brutal start to the season, but he was a notable tight end here in week 4, especially in a game where the Seahawks just didn't have to throw that much. I do wonder how much of this is the Dolphins' defense, how much of this is Noah Fant. But his target share was 18%. That was a season high. He barely played, too. 42% of the snaps is not good here for Fant, but the game was over kind of before it started. I think he might have picked up, toe limited in practice, so that was 2 weeks ago. Nothing new, I don't think, injury-wise here for Noah Fant, but noteworthy and definitely worth rostering, I think, right now in fantasy. All right, that's the Dolphins-Seahawks game. That was a much less exciting game. Some of these next ones. We're going to get to Ravens-Cowboys. We're going to get to 49ers-Rams. Then we're going to go to the Chiefs-Falcons. Then we're going to go to the 2 games from last night. Then we're going to wrap up, get to some of the comments before we wrap up. All right, let's get to the Lions-Cardinals game. This one just should have been a better game than it ended up being. Let's start with the Lions side of the ball. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the highest floor receivers, pretty clearly. It didn't show it in week 1, showed it week 2, showed it week 3. I think that he picked up another small, dealt with contusion and cramping in week 2. That was a week ago. I think he might have picked up another small thing, but he's fine. I think after this game, injury-wise, over 20 points now in back-to-back weeks, top 12 receiver back-to-back weeks, 7 catches, 75 yards, and a TD in this one. Target share, 36% back-to-back games with at least 20% target share. Do I drop Corm? We're about to get to that Rams game, but yes, drop like Corm. We'll talk about that in a second. I was hesitant to jump to that after week 1. 3 weeks in, yes, you can drop Blake Corm. We'll get there in a second. But Amon-Ra, locked and loaded as a top 5 receiver rest of the season. I actually think there's an argument that he's the wide receiver 1. There's an argument that he's the wide receiver 1. I don't think I would argue that, but there is an argument. He's wide receiver 4 in our projections here in week 4. Not really a great game, though, again, from Jared Goff. Only 15 fantasy points. He did throw 2 touchdowns, only 199 passing yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 78% completion percentage was good, but he did throw a pick, take 2 sacks. No games over 16 points yet from Goff, despite kind of 3 good game environments to some extent. I mean, he had 300 yards in week 2, but no touchdowns. Week 1 against the Rams was a big disappointment. And then week 3 against a bad Cardinals defense, only 15.6 points. Now he gets the Seahawks defense. Hard to start Jared Goff, I think, right now in week 4 with how he's performed. We actually project him to have his best game of the season. But that's not saying that much, only 16.8 points. Not something to get super excited about. At the quarterback position, Gibbs and Montgomery, they both are just locked and loaded as top 15 running backs. Gibbs has now been a top 15 running back all 3 weeks. He only has 1 rushing touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown. This season, still been top 15 running back all 3 weeks, 16 plus points all 3 weeks. It's really the receiving role here for Gibbs that's been massive, but no targets. How do you have a 20-yard catch and a touchdown with no targets? That must not be updated. I don't understand that. But he had 16 carries in this one. That was only a 37% rush share, 5.2 yards per carry. Gibbs locked and loaded as a top 12 running back for the season. But Montgomery is looking like the better value pick in fantasy. He's been just as good. He's been better than Gibbs in fantasy. He's the guy getting the goal line work, scoring the rushing touchdowns. And he's also been pretty involved in the receiving game. He's got 8 catches through 3 games for David Montgomery. A really strong player to have in fantasy right now. Got to feel really good about him rest of season. And both these guys, both Gibbs and Monty, massive contingent upside if one of them goes down and misses time. Montgomery is clearly the better value in fantasy right now from the draft perspective and probably what it takes to trade for these guys. I don't think it's going to be easy to trade for Montgomery, but definitely a good guy to try to get on your teams. Not a horrible fantasy playoff schedule either. Gibbs, certainly has the higher ceiling, but both guys in similar roles, similar right now for rest of season rankings. Jaymo was a massive disappointment here in week 3. I mean, massive bust for me. I had him in all my DFS lineups, bunch of my head-to-head contests. I don't know if I can play him in head-to-heads. After this game, only 1 catch, 9 yards. I do think he bounces back. He's not a horrible buy low. He still had 38% of the total air yards in this game for the Lions, so that's definitely good to see. I think he probably bounces back. Only 70% snap percentage is a bit surprising here. For Jaymo, he did run a route in 92% of the passing plays, though, which was pretty on par for him. I think this is going to look back and be one of his worst games of the season for Jaymo, but a huge L for me for sure in week 3. Sam Laporta picked up an injury in this game. I don't think he's going to play. I do not think he's going to play in week 4. We're right now projecting him like just a reduced role in week 4. I think if he plays, you do have to be concerned about what's the real role for Laporta going to be. I'd much rather him just rest, go to the bye. They got the bye next week. Again, like in these spots, just let Laporta rest, man. Go beat the Seahawks without Sam Laporta. Let him rest in week 5. and then get him fully healthy for the rest of the season. That's what I'm hoping for. That's kind of what I expect for Sam Laporta. But if he does play, I think we're in a really rough spot in fantasy where we kind of have to start him, but it's really risky because he could re-aggravate the injury, or he might just not be at his full role and be a little bit of a decoy potentially. He's off to a horrible start this season. This would be the worst 3-game stretch of Sam Laporta's season last year that he has this year, under 8.5 points all 3 games. Only 2 catches, 36 yards in this one. Again, he did pick up an ankle injury in this one, but really, really rough start. He's tight end 19 on the season, was tight end 1, drafted in most fantasy drafts. I still think he's probably top 5 tight end rest of the season, but man, really rough start for Laporta. On the Cardinals side of the ball, this was the really disappointing side offensively in this game. Kyler Murray starts hot in this one and then just completely fizzled out. Only 16 points. He did throw a touchdown and had 45 rushing yards. The rushing production for Kyler has been really strong, raising his floor a ton. He's got the highest floor again in week 4 among quarterbacks. He's over 20% rush share 2 of his 3 games now. Five carries in all of the games. He was pushing the ball down the field here too. 11.6 air yards per attempt. Just didn't complete enough of his passes. 62% completion percentage. 6.1 yards per attempt in total. Just not what we needed from Kyler Murray in terms of accuracy and completing balls. And there's also a couple plays the receivers just couldn't come down with it. 1 pick, 1 sack. I'm not worried about Kyler really at all. I think he's still a top 5 quarterback rest of the season. There's not very many quarterbacks I'd want more than Kyler Murray in fantasy right now because his floor with the rushing is just so high, and the ceiling is clearly sky high too. We already saw him finish QB1 just a week ago in week 2, and he could have had an even bigger game in that one. So yeah, I do like what I'm seeing from Kyler. Marvin Harrison Jr., another massive game here. He had 17.4 points, finishes wide receiver 20, 5 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. But the really massive thing here was the target share. Back-to-back games now, over a 32% target share for Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, elite stuff. Both him and Nabers, elite receivers, both justifying their draft costs in fantasy so far. I still think Nabers is the clear better pick at value, which I think we were right about before the season. But he's now seen over 40% of the air yards. Marv, for the Cardinals back-to-back weeks, just a massive ceiling, pretty strong floor with this type of usage. Now he gets the Commanders here in week 4. He ranks as our wide receiver 5 in week 4 in the Walter Picks app. James Conner still in a really elite role too. He ranks as running back 6 here in week 4. Bad game for him, only 3.5 points, but he did play 75% of the snaps. He only saw 50% of the carries, a lot of those going to Kyler. But strong route percentage, only 1 target, but strong route rate for Conner. I do think he bounces back here in week 4 after a down game. Michael Wilson, well, I've been saying it really since week 1. He's the guy you want over Greg Dortch. I think that showed up in this one too. 8 catches, 64 yards. He had a strong 26% target share. I think that might have been a career high for Michael Wilson. The air yards, though, is the reason you want him. I don't think these air yard numbers are, there's no air yards in here. I don't know what's going on there. We'll look into that. But Greg Dortch, I think he's still, 3 catches, 35 yards. His target share was down this week. The air yards just not that exciting here for Greg Dortch. I'll look into that Michael Wilson thing. Not sure what's going on there. Elijah Higgins is probably my favorite tight end streamer of week 4. If you don't have Cole Kmet, I do not think Trey McBride plays this week. He got concussed in this game. He'll probably be back, hopefully be back the following week. Elijah Higgins, a deep sleeper for me in Dynasty. He is the preferred pass-catching tight end after Trey McBride. He actually caught a really good touchdown in week 2 against the Rams. He has at least 1 catch in all of the games. He's a converted wide receiver. This is year 2 for Elijah Higgins in the NFL. Last year, he converted from receiver to tight end. He's a wide receiver, and I think he's going to get a lot of the role from McBride. I also think some of that flows through to Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch too, and James Conner as well. But Elijah Higgins is well on the streaming radar. We have him as tight end 10 right now, how elite the tight ends are in a good matchup against the Commanders here in week 4. Benson is I think still worth a roster slot, but he's done nothing, man. He hasn't looked good at all. He in his limited opportunities look bad. He only had 2 carries in this one, 4 yards per carry. He hasn't had any big plays. I think he's still worth a roster spot in deeper leagues with the contingent upside if Conner misses time, which, guys, James Conner has missed at least 1 game in every single year of his career. That was part of the thesis for Trey Benson. So, stash that note somewhere away if you really are in need of running back. But tough to get too excited about Trey Benson right now. All right, on to the next game here, the Ravens and the Cowboys. This one was a great game for sure. Lamar Jackson played great. I think he was QB2, QB4 on the week with 26 fantasy points, 1 passing touchdown, another 87 rushing yards for Lamar. Only threw 15 pass attempts in this game. Noteworthy for any takeaways from this game. Only 15 pass attempts for Lamar. In games where the Ravens lead, they are not going to throw a lot. And in games where they trail, they're clearly willing to throw a lot. In week 1, he threw 41 times In week 3, only 15 times. That's a massive, massive range. Over 15% target share in every single game. Another game over 30% rush share. For Lamar, 12.1 yards per attempt. He was balling in the air in his 12 completions in this game. They really kind of handled this game from start to finish. Top 10 QB all 3 weeks now for Lamar. Zay Flowers had a down game in this one again, but there's only 12 completions. So all the receivers have down games. They just lean on the run extremely heavily. I'm not panicked on Zay Flowers. If anything, I think he's an interesting buy candidate right now in fantasy, a pretty good buy low candidate. Derrick Henry got involved. They ran again a ton in this game. He had 30 points, RB3 in the week, 2 TDs, 150 yards against the Cowboys. Also had a 23-yard catch in this game. I mean, he's seeing all the rushing work here. 55% of the carries. I think Lamar the other 30%. Basically all, but just these two guys are the only guys getting real volume on the ground. Justice Hill, I think, still had some routes and some targets, but he's just a dart thrower, deep running back 4/flex option. 25 carries for Derrick Henry as a season high. Games where they get a lead, Derrick Henry's going to pop off. Mark Andrews is really like kind of not startable right now. He had a donut here in week 3 after only 3.4 in week 1. His usage went down dramatically, 33% snap share for Andrews. Fully panicked on Mark Andrews at this point. And I don't think this is going to be common. A 33% snap share, I don't think it's going to be common. But you got to wonder what's going on with Mark Andrews through 3 games. We were ringing the panic bells after week 1, and a lot of people were like, calm down. He's not good against the Chiefs. He's still going to be tight end 1. He did sort of show that a little bit here in week 2, where he had a better game than Likely. And I was on Andrews over Likely train after week 2. But I still thought both, were kind of at risk for some boom bust type of games. And we're seeing that here with Andrews. Just really concerning usage game. And you have to wonder if the surgery he got this offseason is still lingering into this season. Only 1 target. 11 air yards on that target, did not catch it. Donut for Mark Andrews, just brutal pain for Mark Andrews. And this is another just tough spot for fantasy, similar to if Sam Laporta tries to play through his injury. Like if Andrews is playing week 4, which he's going to be, in a lot of spots, you're just going to have to start him because he's still Mark Andrews. He still did okay week 2. But man, we just saw the floor for Andrews, and it's as low as it gets for Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely, I did do better than him here in week 4, just barely, with 1.4 points. Like both these guys have just a really low floor when this offense is going to skew run heavy. Bateman is notable, I think, in this game too. 11.8 points. He did score the receiving touchdown. He's had back-to-back games with a somewhat real role. I guess in 2 of the 3 weeks, not back-to-back games, he's had over 40% of the air yards. For the Ravens, he's the deep threat in this offense. Nelson Aguilar, I think, had a big catch in this game too. He's a wind sprint guy, though, still not a noteworthy player for fantasy. All right, let's get to the Cowboys side of the ball. Drop Ezekiel Elliott. If you have Zeke, drop him. I saw some stuff out there saying, if you're in deeper leagues, you probably shouldn't drop him. No, drop Zeke. Don't waste your roster slot on Zeke. You want your roster slots, whether you're in a deep league or shallow league, you want your roster slots full of guys that can win your league. The same way you think about it in the draft, where in the later rounds, you want to be drafting guys that with league-winning upside. That's what you got to be thinking about with your roster slots in the deep parts of your bench. Zeke is not going to win leagues, guys. Even if Dowdle missed time, Zeke isn't going to win leagues. Zeke has been washed for 3 seasons now. This is the 3rd straight season of inefficiency for Zeke. 2 yards per carry for Zeke in this one, after 2.7 yards per carry for Zeke the week before, and the usage plummeted. 18% rush share for Zeke. They clearly recognize they can't win games with Zeke being this inefficient on the ground. He didn't even play 20% of the snaps. Guys, he ran 6 routes, 15 total snaps. Rough go for Zeke. He is absolutely a drop in fantasy. And even if Dowdle goes down, I'm not going to be rushing to add him. Zeke needs to be in the situation he was in last year with the Pats, where he's literally projected for 25 plus touches, and then he's fantasy relevant. That's the only way to fantasy relevance for Zeke. And there's almost no world where he's getting 25 plus touches anymore. He is absolutely a drop. He is toast. Rico Dowdle, worth an add. Tough to get too excited about Dowdle too. No games over 10 points here. He did have 3 catches. Kind of the main benefactor of Zeke, not being good and not playing a lot, but still playing less than half the snaps here for Dowdle, only 50% rush share. He's worth a speculative add, but he absolutely cannot be started right now. Dak Prescott in this game against the Ravens. He finished as the QB2 on the week with 30 points, 379 yards, and 2 TDs. By far the best game of the season for Dak here. 51 pass attempts, 482 air yards for Dak in this game. 7.4 yards attempt, not bad, but not terrible. I mean, not great, but not terrible on this type of volume. 8.9 air yards per attempt is encouraging. Pushing the ball down the field. He did get sacked 3 times, no picks for Dak. Good fantasy game. Okay, real game for Dak. Obviously, they lost the game in real life. But CeeDee Lamb, another kind of floor game here for Lamb. His worst game of the season, 8.7 points, only 4 catches, 67 yards. I mean, there's some guys that are just getting their defense are just playing them differently. And CeeDee Lamb, I think, is clearly one of those guys. I mean, they're clearly locked in on him on defense for the last 2 games. I mean, against the Saints, the touchdown he scored against the Saints, he was literally double teamed, and he still managed to score a touchdown, have a good game in that one. I don't know if you guys were watching last night too. We're about to get to that game, but Jamar Chase in the red zone was literally just straight up double teamed every single play inside the 5. I mean, they just like, yeah, Jamar Chase is not going to be the guy that beats us here. Pretty crazy stuff to see in the NFL. Pretty rare stuff to see in the NFL, but I think we are seeing it a bit here with Lamb. I am buying Lamb where I can. Only 14% target share. Back-to-back weeks under 20% target share. Not great for Lamb. He still projects the top 3 receiver rest of the season. Arguably still wide receiver 1. Rest of the season, you got to expect him to bounce back. Obviously, it's not going to be easy to buy Lamb still. But if you have him, I'm holding him. And if you don't have him, I'm willing to see if the person with him is panicking. Jake Ferguson, I do think, bounce back. Yeah, after missing week 2 with the injury, instantly back into the rotation. No, tight end 3. Not very many tight ends I'd really want more than him. He had 22% target share, 11 total targets in this game. 6 catches, 95 yards. Again, when you see tight ends finish in the top 10 and they don't score a touchdown, buy those tight ends. That's why we're buying Brock Bowers. That's why we're buying Jake Ferguson. Did score a touchdown. This one was still tight end 3 in this game. There's not very many tight ends that can finish top 10 without touchdowns. Jake Ferguson, absolutely one of them. Brandon Cooks, down game for him. Again, Jalen Tolbert scored a touchdown, I think, in this one. He did. 3 catches, 42 yards. Now back-to-back games, over 13 points for Jalen Tolbert. Deeper leagues, he's definitely worth an add. He's not the worst flex option in deeper leagues. His air yards haven't been terrible, I don't think. Yeah, over 20% of the air yards for the Cowboys back-to-back weeks. Like, this guy has some real upside in your flex. Nothing to get too excited about, but I think I probably would prefer him over Cooks rest of season. We got Cooks projected ahead of him here in this upcoming week 4. He has played more snaps. Target volume hasn't quite been there for Cooks. It was better week 1. I think it's a pretty close call, honestly, between Cooks and Tolbert. All right, let's get to another exciting game here, the 49ers and the Rams. And man, RIP to everyone in survivor pools, unless you were smart and you went with the Bills or the Jets in week 4. I mean, my survivor pool, of course, I did a smart thing, and I went with 49ers. There's no way that the 49ers don't beat this awful Rams team. They have no Cooper Kupp. They have no Puka Nacua. They have no offensive line. Like, of course, the 49ers are the survivor pool pick this week. Somehow no one else in my survivor pool picked the 49ers. Still kind of astonished about that. I have no idea how the 49ers ended up losing this game. They had over 95% win probability multiple times in this game. They ended up losing. I think they missed a field goal in this game. Anyways, Brock Purdy looked great. I wonder, though, how much for fantasy he looked great, at least. 26 fantasy points for Brock, 292. Back-to-back games, over 290 passing yards. Threw 3 TDs in this one, too. Also had 41 rushing yards. Probably going to be the best rushing game of Brock Purdy's season. So that, don't think that's going to be repeatable. He had 9.7 yards per attempt. Really strong. 73% completion percentage. He did get sacked once and get had 1 fumble, which I think actually ended up maybe losing the 49ers the game here. But I do wonder how much of this is just we got to be targeting the Rams defense, because we look at the Rams defense. We saw Jared Goff. He didn't do great in week 1 with only 12.4 points, but Kyler had 28.5 points and could have went for a 40 bomb if that game was close. And then we saw Purdy go for 25 points. Both guys over 9.5 yards per attempt. Even Goff in that first game was at 7.8 yards per attempt. I think this Rams defense is one to attack, and I think Caleb Williams, interesting buy low chance here for Caleb Williams. He gets the Rams in week 4. I do think that's going to be a good spot for him. Brock Purdy ranks as QB 14 here in week 4. Jordan Mason, he is this year's Kyron Williams, a floor game for him, but still 11 points. Still had a massive rush share, 19 carries in this one. Just didn't convert any touchdowns. He did have 2 catches as well. Must start moving forward as always. Juwan Jennings, though, how did I not go straight to him here, man? This was one of the best wide receiver games of all time, guys. I don't want to understate this game from Juwan Jennings. This was one of the greatest wide receiver games of all time. And, do I think Juwan Jennings, is this like smash fantasy player rest of the season? Is he this year's Puka Nacua, dare I say? Because I had some people asking me about that in our Discord. By the way, join our Discord. Link is in the YouTube description. I saw some chatter about this year's Puka Nacua maybe being Juwan Jennings. I had some people texting me about this guy. Is he this year's Puka? I wouldn't go that far about Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings is not a rookie. He's not coming out of nowhere. Juwan Jennings has always been the clear, wide receiver 3 on this 49ers offense. Debo's out, though. CMC's out, though. And Kittle was out in this game, too. So it was clear this game was going to be Ayuk in Juwan Jennings. But I don't want to take away from this game. Again, this was one of the greatest wide receiver games, guys, of all time. 11 catches, 175, and 3 touchdowns. That's got to rank, as one of the best, top 25 receiver games like in the last decade. I think that this probably ranks in there. There's not very many games over 45 fantasy points. I can think of just a couple, in the last few years. He had 12 targets, so he caught 11 of his 12 targets. He had a 40% target share in this game, saw 45% of the air yards in this game. He absolutely is a good start here in week 4 against the Pats. The Pats did get crushed by Jackson Smith and Jigba. The Pats did kind of get crushed by Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard. I do think Juwan Jennings is a solid start here in week 4. I don't love him rest of season. Debo's going to come back. Kittle's going to come back. CMC's going to come back. I think, he's a specialist in Germany. That doesn't seem great, but I do think he's going to come back. I do think that saw the news about CMC crying. Was there news that literally just broke about CMC, or is it the Germany stuff that I'm referencing now? Let me just refresh here to make sure I didn't miss any breaking news during this live stream. I don't think I did. Yeah, the Germany thing, though, is not good for CMC. No, I didn't miss any breaking news. Let me know in the YouTube chat if I did. Why do you have CMC at RB5 rest of the season? Yeah, we'll talk about this in a second when we get actually we're on the 49ers, so we can talk about this now. But yeah, Juwan Jennings, solid week 4 option. I don't think he's the best rest of season option, but obviously an ad. I wouldn't go, blowing your whole fab budget on him, but you got to give respect to this game for Juwan. I actually think, though, the real buy low for the 49ers, buy low on Brandon Ayuk with the bazooka, guys. He's been under 10 points all 3 weeks. People with Brandon Ayuk have to be panicking. They just watched Juwan Jennings, explode 4 times the amount of points, more than 4 times the amount of points than Brandon Ayuk had. But the underlying usage, guys, for Ayuk was actually really strong in this game too. 33% target share for Ayuk, 30% of the air yards. It's exactly kind of what we expected when we went into this game without Debo, without Kittle, without CMC. So yeah, I'm really bullish on Ayuk. I think he could have a huge game against the Pats. We've seen big receiver games already against the Pats. I know Christian Gonzalez is good, but I'm buying Ayuk for sure. I think that, with the circumstances for Ayuk, he was in a slow ramp up leading into the season because he didn't really have a preseason. He still had a good target share in this game, just didn't end up getting the massive plays that Jennings had, didn't score the touchdowns that Jennings had. But yeah, Ayuk is a clear buy for me, and I think a clear, top 25 receiver rest of the season right now. George Kittle didn't play in this one. We haven't projected in here in week 4. That's definitely up in the air, though. Not a lock for him to play this week. It sounded like he's likely to return to practice this week, so we'll see. I don't think that changes the dynamics here that much, but definitely lowers the ceiling a bit for both Ayuk and for Jennings. I do want to see Garendo. I think got a couple snaps here. I still think he's in very deep leagues. He's got some intriguing upside. He does seem like the clear backup running back to Mason if he goes down in McCaffrey's absence. So I see this comment in the YouTube live. Why is CMC so high in the rest of the season rankings? So yeah, let's pull up the rest of the season rankings. He ranks as RB5 rest of season right now. We're projecting Christian McCaffrey back in week 7 right now. So if you disagree with that, you disagree with the rest of the season ranking. There's definitely a chance we don't see him back until after the bye in week 10. I do think that Christian McCaffrey will play this season, though. And if you're with me on that, then yeah, he probably is a top 5 running back rest of the season, especially if you're 3-0 or 2-1. Again, all that matters is the fantasy football playoffs. All that matters. So if Christian McCaffrey is healthy and playing in the fantasy football playoffs, then yeah, I would treat him as a top 10 running back rest of the season. He's probably going to be the running back 1 projected. Look, he's the running back 1 projected in all of these games. He's the running back 1 projected in every healthy game he's ever really been in. So yeah, it's a little risky. Obviously, he's going to Germany, seeing a specialist. Maybe we got to change this to project him back week 10 to be a little bit more cautious here, get him down a bit in the rest of the season ranks. But he absolutely still has fantasy value if he's back for the fantasy playoffs. He actually has a ton of fantasy value if he's back for the playoffs. Definitely worried about the production. I'm not panicked, but also most of it's coming back, which is, I think, a little concerning for HN. But again, for the Dolphins, similar thing I was saying here for CMC, I do think it seems likely at least, that Tua comes back. And I think that's massive for that whole offense. All right, let's talk about the next game here. I think that's the Chiefs-Falcons. And I think we're only 3 games left here. And we're almost at the end. This has been a fun one. Then we'll get to some comments too. So the Chiefs-Falcons. So, I don't know how the Chiefs are 3 now. I'm pretty crazy. Really 2 pass interference calls away from being 1 and 2. Mahomes, though, has been bad. Guys, Mahomes has been straight up bad. He's under 18 points all 3 games. I saw some stuff about his air yards. God, man, these are literal Bryce Young numbers. How are we seeing Bryce Young numbers here for Mahomes? I really don't get it. 5.3 air yards per attempt. He doesn't have a game over 5.5 air yards per attempt. As Mahomes is running a Bryce Young style offense right now. The only difference is he's actually accurate, and not going to get sacked a million times, not going to throw picks. But in terms of how aggressive he's being, pushing the ball down the field, Bryce Young type offense. For Mahomes, it's got to change, man. I can't believe we got robbed of this Marquise Brown Mahomes connection, which definitely is contributing to this a little bit. Like he's just finding all these targets, line scrimmage to Rashee Rice and getting the yak from there, but still under 6 yards per attempt in this game against the Falcons is absolutely terrible. Not good right now from Mahomes. I think he still probably have to start him. Like his floor hasn't been terrible. He still has 5 touchdowns through 3 games, but just not a super high ceiling if he's not going to push the ball down the field at all. He also has at least 1 pick in all 3 games. He's got 4 picks this season. Didn't get sacked once in this game, though. Rashee Rice, guys, he projects as wide receiver 2 right now in week 4. He is some wide receiver 1 week projections. He's projected a top 6 receiver every single week for the rest of the season in our projections right now. Rashee Rice is a league-winning player right now in fantasy. If he stays healthy, guys, he's projecting for over 30% target share from Mahomes rest of season. I mean, there's just kind of no one in his path. Xavier Worthy's not looking like he's going to command a significant target share. Marquise Brown's out for the season. Kelsey's looked the shell of himself. Let's get to the Kelsey thing, though, because I do think you want to buy low on Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce still projects as top 5 tight end rest of the season for us, guys. The main thing here for Kelce was on my do not draft list. I could be taking a victory lap here, with Kelce on my do not draft list. He's at 7 or less points. It was actually his best fantasy game of the season with only 7 points here. He's not finished as a top 12 tight end a single time this season. This is why it's a buy low. I do think like the person with Kelce should be pretty panicked. He is a 35-year-old tight end who has not scored 10 points in a single game, and Mahomes is not pushing the ball down the field at all. That being said, like if you had told me before the season, Kelce's going to go under 10 points in all these games, I would have said, oh, how much is he even playing? Maybe they're not pushing him to full extent because he's 35 years old. That's just not the case, guys. Kelce is 5 to 4 TD to INT ratio, man, for Mahomes. That's just wild stuff, especially with him. He's not pushing down the ball down the field and he's throwing picks. Like, how is that even possible? I just don't get that at all. I do think makes sense. I think he'll probably come back week 10. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that we probably should honestly project that with the weird Germany thing going on, but he's got to be back week 10. There's absolutely a chance CMC, by the way, does miss the season. There's absolutely a chance of that. That's not what we're projecting, but it is possible, of course. You should hold or buy Tyreek Hill, in my opinion. Let's look at this specific Travis Kelce question. Anyways, there's not very many tight ends you really want in fantasy right now. Kelce could finish the rest of the season as tight end 1. Wouldn't be shocking. The Chiefs desperately need Kelce to step up. He's out there basically every single play. He's running around basically every single passing attempt. He just hasn't hit a ceiling game yet. Hasn't seen the targets yet. You got to think sooner rather than later we see this massive Travis Kelce game that really shifts the view of Kelce for the rest of the season. The whole reason, by the way, he was on my do not draft list was I thought almost the opposite of what was going to happen is happening. I thought that he was going to be one of the best tight ends, maybe the best tight end in fantasy for most of the season. But I was scared that he wasn't going to be at full steam for the fantasy football playoffs because last year he went under 10 PPR points in all 3 fantasy football playoff games because the Chiefs were resting him down the stretch to get him ready for the actual NFL playoffs. And it worked. And this year they're going to go in the playoffs again. They're all locked to be in the NFL playoffs already. And they're going for the 3-peat. I am still a little scared of that. But I think at this point, like he's probably worth the buy low. I think he can help you get to the fantasy football playoffs. And who knows, with how the Chiefs have played, maybe they are still hunting for the bye and they do still have stuff to play for at the end of the season. Absolutely possible. They could easily be 1 and 2 this season. So yeah, I'm buying low on Travis Kelce for sure. Again, there's just not many tight ends that are valuable right now in fantasy. I think Kelce could quickly become the clear tight end 1 rest of the season with how tight ends have been playing so far this season. All right, the other thing here, Carson Steele, worth the waiver wire ad, but I feel pretty good about the fab recommendation last week. I said be cautious with Carson Steele because it's going to be a committee here in the backfield. They did just raise Kareem Hunt from the practice squad. He's probably going to mix in to some extent. The usage was actually fine for Steele, 17 carries, 50% of the rushing attempts, only 4.2 yards per carry, though, no touchdowns. He had only 1 catch for 2 yards. Really bad receiving role here. He ran 13 routes, only 5% target share for Steele. I mean, what's the real ceiling for him? It's probably like a little less than 20 points, I think, in this offense. And P. Ryan, I liked his under last week. That was an L for me. 25 rushing yards, obviously not great. He played 28 snaps, though. Took 40% of the snaps. Carson Steele is not in the Pacheco role. He is not in the Pacheco role. The whole reason we like Pacheco is he was going to get 80% of the snaps, one of the best offenses. This is not one of the best offenses right now. And there's not a running back in that role. None of these guys are very trustworthy in fantasy. 6 carries stolen from P. Ryan. He also had 4 targets, more targets than Carson Steele. Plus Kareem Hunt is going to be mixing in now. Xavier Worthy, another down game for him, only 5 points. I still think he's like not an unreasonable flex play as an upside play. Like, again, someone needs to step up with this offense. It kind of needs to be Kelsey or Xavier Worthy. They have nobody else. It's not going to be Justin Watson. It's not going to be any of these ancillary guys. It's not going to be Noah Gray. Only 50% of the snaps for Xavier Worthy. His route participation went down. I mean, he's a boom bust, flex option at best right now in fantasy. All right, that's the Steelers side of the ball. The Falcons almost pulled it off, beating the Eagles and then the Chiefs. They really actually should have. The usage for Bijan looked great. He's our RB1 right now, rest of season. The usage is just so strong. 82% of the snaps for Bijan, another 16 carries. Also the receiving role. He only ran 10 routes actually in this one. His route participation was down, only 2 targets, which is like a little bit concerning. Also, the offensive line dealt with some injuries in this game. So there actually was some modest concerns for Bijan, who doesn't even have a game over 20 points this season. But the underlying usage is about as strong as it gets from a snap percentage and rush a carry percentage standpoint. I don't know if he should be our running back one rest of the season. Looking a little deeper in this, though, with the offensive line injuries. It's pretty close. But they gave Algier the ball, and I think he was the lead blocker in like the most critical time of the game. Drake London looks great again. Glad I told people to start Drake London. He's a top 20 receiver back-to-back weeks, top 20 receiver for sure. Rest of season, back-to-back games with 6 catches, back-to-back games over 50 yards, back-to-back games with a receiving touchdown. He's not coming off the field. 33% target share. That was the highest of the season. Drake London locked and loaded as a must-start fantasy player for sure. Not the worst buy high, I don't think either. Drake London, there's a reason he was going in the early second round. There's a reason because he's never had an accurate quarterback in his entire career. And he was one of the most efficient young receivers we've ever seen at the age of his efficiency. Like, you don't see guys get over two yards per out run, at 21 years old. And that's basically what we saw from Drake London. Kyle Pitts, definitely full panic, with Kyle Pitts. I mean, he still finished his tight end 13. He had 2 catches, 59 yards, just 1 big catch, almost scored on that, which would have, really changed the narrative for Pitts. But it's tough to be too excited about Pitts. This season, he doesn't even have a game over 20% target share. His snap percentage is not like what it was week 1, where he played 96% of the snaps. They're giving him more rest. He must have been like sore or something after this week 1 game where they just don't want to get him out there every single snap anymore. He seems firmly behind both London and Darnell Mooney in this offense. And there's going to be games where he gets out-targeted by Bijan and Algier combined as well. But Mooney looks like a must-add. Definitely should be rostered in all leagues. 8 targets in this one, 66 yards, caught all 8 of his targets for 66 yards, 30% target share for Mooney. He's not coming off the field either. He played over 90% of the snaps for the 3rd straight week. Definitely a solid flex option in Darnell Mooney. Ray McLeod, another one of these Wan'Dale Robinson types, no games over 10 points. He might show up in the target share numbers and the target numbers at times, but he's not a guy you want to start at all. And Tyler Algier, one of the higher upside handcuffs for sure. But yeah, no standalone value at all for Algier. He had 2 rush attempts in this game, 0 targets, barely played like any meaningful role for fantasy. All right, that's let's just pull up Kirk Cousins. Didn't even mention Kirk Cousins here. And not a good game for him. 230 yards and a touchdown. He had 7.9 yards per attempt, only 5.3 air yards per attempt for Kirk. He looked better week 3 and 2 than he did week 1. So at least that's a positive. He did throw a pick and get sacked twice in this game, but only 12 fantasy points. He's kind of off the fantasy radar right now with how this offense is being run. All right, let's get to the last 2 games, which were both last night. Both exciting games in their own way. I mean, the Bills, Josh Allen, he's the only early round QB you could possibly feel really good about right now. 2 games over 30 points, 2 games as the QB1. He looks destined to be the QB1 this season. Even on a run-first team, he's going to be efficient enough, and he's going to take enough of the rushing to be the QB1, most likely this fantasy season. He's got 7 touchdowns now through 3 games. He threw 4 in this game, didn't even really play in the 4th quarter of this one either. There's going to be games where someone keeps pace with the Bills, and Josh Allen's just going to go bananas. I mean, he could have had 6 touchdowns in this game. 76% completion percentage, 8.8 yards per attempt, not even a high air yards per attempt, but just quick completions to the right guys in the right moments, right yards after the catch opportunities. Massive game here for Josh Allen. I think he did actually. I guess he didn't run for a touchdown. I don't know why I thought he ran for a touchdown too, but he had some rushing yards. Maybe he came close to rushing for 1. James Cook continues to be one of the highest floor running backs in all of fantasy football. 3 straight games over 13 points. There's not a game script that is bad for James Cook. Oh, sorry, I pulled this comment up. Should I trade Rashid Shaheed for London and Travis Kelce? Yes. I mean, 100%. You should do that. Pitts and Chase Brown for Bowers? Yes. definitely do that one too. We're going to get to more comments here in a second. James Cook, one of the highest floor running backs in fantasy. Whether they're falling behind, he's going to get catches. Whether they're getting a lead, he's going to get rushing attempts. He scored a rushing touchdown again. Now he's 3 rushing touchdowns. He has 4 total touchdowns this season, way higher touchdown rate than he had in the past. He had another 5 targets. In this one, caught 4 of those for 48 yards. PPR beast right now, top 12 running back. He ranks as running back 8 this week. And he's running back 6 in points right now this season. Khalil Shakir, massive game for him. 19.2, 6 catches, 72 yards on 6 targets. Another guy catching all 6 of his targets. I mean, really, really ridiculous efficiency here for Allen. I think Keon Coleman, did he only have 1 catch? Yeah, 1 catch for Coleman, 24 yards on a TD. Low volume receiver in offense, spreading the ball around the block. Coleman is not a guy that I really feel good starting, but he probably should be rostered. But this is a team that does want to be run heavy. Kincaid bounced back. He projects as a top 5 tight end here in week 4 now. He was tight end 5 in week 3. 3 catches, 41 and a touchdown. Not a guy that did it without a touchdown, but he did see back-to-back games now over 15% target share. I think his snap percentage, he was only 53% because he didn't really play in the 4th quarter, but it was actually felt a little higher than this in the 3 quarters that he did play in. And he had 2 end zone targets in this game, which was also encouraging. Still think there's going to be some floor games for Kincaid on an offense that spreads the ball around and wants to run. Jaguars look awful. I mean, full panic time in this whole offense, really. There were some reports after the game that Trevor Lawrence might get benched for Mac Jones. He's now been under 14 fantasy points all games. He's droppable in fantasy for sure. He threw a pick, got sacked 4 times in this game, but even worse than that, 4.7 yards per attempt. Absolutely abysmal. This Bills defense actually looks pretty good. By the way, they shut down Tua the week before. They crushed Trevor Lawrence in this game. He had absolutely nothing in this game. I do think he had some decent connections, at least with Christian Kirk, who finally bounced back. He finished with 16 points. He up 8 catches, 79 yards. I did expect this from Christian Kirk. Did not expect him to stay as bad as he was going to be through those first 2 games. We saw the floor, though, and the floor is pretty low for kind of every guy in this offense. With Trevor Lawrence playing this bad, he projects his wide receiver 25, though, is startable. Brian Thomas Jr. also looks fine in this game. He's been over 9.5 points now in all 3 games. 5 catches, 48 yards. He's out there enough. Target share is enough, I think, to be startable as a flex option in fantasy. Gabe Davis' revenge game didn't come through, only 3.8 points. I think he picked up an injury in this one, potentially. Did he? No, not that I'm seeing it. He says questionable here. I think he might have picked up a small injury. I don't remember if he got knocked out of the game or not. I don't think he did get knocked out of the game. ETN, down game for him. It still finished with 12 points because he had 4 catches for 17 yards, just missed his prop. Volume was there receiving-wise, though. He had 6 targets, 14% target share. He's had at least 13% target share all 3 games. Rush share, snap percentage have all been pretty good. We don't have the route in rush. So we don't have the routes in here yet, I think probably because the game was yesterday, but a pretty good receiving role here for ETN. Definitely still a must start, but still not great. Hopefully Evan Ingram's back next week. We'll see about that. Expected to miss Monday Night Football. That was last night. We'll see if he comes back. Brendan Strange did have a role with Evan Ingram out. He was one of my favorite streamers last week. He was a top 10 tight end now back-to-back weeks, which actually gives me some optimism about Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram may be an interesting buy low that can help this offense turn around a little bit. And also, I'm not buying Trevor Lawrence getting benched. I mean, come on here. Mac Jones is not going to improve this offense over Trevor Lawrence. I don't buy that for a second. I think that's just them trying to light a fire maybe over Trevor Lawrence, which I probably don't think is going to work as a tactic. All right, last game to talk through here. The Commanders, and I mean, probably the most exciting game, honestly, of the week here for last. So last but certainly not least, we got Jayden Daniels, who's the QB2 in fantasy football right now. I think only behind Josh Allen. He's balling, man. I mean, Jayden Daniels is everything we thought he would be. I said before the season, Jayden Daniels was built in a lab for fantasy football. If I went into a lab and I said, let's build a quarterback for fantasy football, what would come out is Jayden Daniels and Anthony Richardson's body. That's basically what would come out. So we're almost there at the ideal quarterback. As long as Jayden Daniels stays healthy, he's been now top 15 quarterback all 3 weeks, top 3 quarterback in 2 of 3 weeks. He's rushing. He's 3 rushing touchdowns this season now, at least 39 rushing yards in every single game. He had 2 passing TDs, first passing touchdowns of his career in this game. 254 passing. Really, though, the passing stuff was super impressive. Guys, again, the floor, rushing improves guys' floor in fantasy, but it's the passing that you need for the ceiling. This is the big problem with Anthony Richardson. He still has an interesting floor for fantasy with some of the rushing and his rushing touchdown upside, but the passing, man, it is just incredible for Jayden Daniels. He was the most accurate deep passer in all of college football last season, and this showed up here on Monday night. They were not losing this game with Jayden Daniels balling like this. He completed 91% of his passes. He broke some NFL records in this game with his efficiency, guys. 11 yards per attempt in this game. He almost had a perfect quarterback rating in this game. He got sacked twice, but got through 3 games, no interceptions, no fumbles, no injuries, knock on wood, for Jayden Daniels. The only concern I heard about Jayden Daniels the whole process with the NFL draft was that he was going to get hurt. And I just don't buy narratives like that. All of these guys have a high risk of injury, guys. It's one of the most injury-prone sports in all of sports. And Jayden Daniels is capable of sliding. He actually slid in this game. Like, I mean, what were we doing? Saying that this guy is going to be bad for fantasy, bad for the NFL, just because he's going to get hurt. Again, not trying to jinx this year, but I mean, massive game for Jayden Daniels. He's a must-start in fantasy moving forward. QB4 projected in week 4. Brian Robinson looking like a good week 4 option too. He only had 10 points in this game, but Austin Eckler did pick up an injury. Don't think Eckler is going to play this week. I think it was a concussion for Eckler. I mean, massive usage resulting there for Brian Robinson. Season high snap percentage, 76%, rush share, 50%. A lot of that rest of that rush share went to Jayden Daniels. I think he also had 1 target, which actually was his lowest of the season. Do you think that goes up with Austin Eckler out? It's a good matchup here against the Arizona Cardinals now too, that just got dominated by Dave Montgomery and Gibbs, who combined for over 35 fantasy points. Kyron Williams had over 15 points. James Cook had over 13 points. Really good floor here for B-Rob in week 4. Terry McLaurin had a big game too. He bounced back. Hope you bought low on McLaurin when you could. The reason that I'm still a little skittish on McLaurin is just they are still spreading the ball around a lot. I think it was, we said in week 2, it was like 8 different players at least 3 targets. Something similar in this game, but the target share has still been there for McLaurin, over 15% in all the games. Good air yard numbers here. 69% of the air yards for McLaurin in this game. Massive role. Definitely a decent startable player in fantasy. I think my concerns might have been a little bit overblown. And we're going to see this deep passing accuracy show up in this offense with Jayden Daniels. By the way, WTF going on with the Bengals, another storyline. I was watching week 3, not looking great for the Bengals here through 3 games. But at least the offense showed up against a bad defense in this one, which we'll get to in a second. Zach Ertz is a startable tight end in fantasy, like one of the higher floor tight ends. He's got at least 3 catches in all 3 games, at least 8 fantasy points in all 3 games. Another guy who's able to finish as a top 10 tight end without a touchdown. The touchdown's going to come, guys, for some of these guys without a touchdown. He's got at least 5 points in every game without a touchdown. That's actually pretty good. He's seeing a pretty high percentage of the air yards for tight ends. He's seeing at least 13% target share in every single game. I think Zach Ertz, he's the floor play at tight end off the waiver wire. Elijah Higgins is the ceiling play off the waiver wire at tight end. I also think Cole Kmet, he's the ceiling play for tight ends off the waiver wire too. But Ertz is definitely a decent floor. Yeah, Eckler got hurt in this one. Luke McCaffrey, he had 3 catches, 44 yards. I think he almost had a touchdown in this game. He only played 33% of the snaps, which was down actually a lot week over week. So not startable in fantasy. Still kind of an interesting dynasty stash, though, for sure. All right, that's everything for the Commanders. The Bengals side of this game, to wrap this up, pretty much exactly what we expected. I mean, honestly, like kind of crazy how good of a game the offense had, and they still lose in real football. Burrow had 25 points. He played great. 8.5 yards per attempt in this one. He did get sacked twice, but no picks against this Commanders defense. 324 yards, 3 passing touchdowns for Burrow. Almost like a pretty perfect game for Burrow. Jamar Chase explodes, wide receiver 2 on the week, only behind the GOAT, Juwan Jennings, with one of the all-time games from Juwan. But then there was Jamar Chase, 30 points in this game, 118, 2 TDs. Guys, you've got to start receivers against this Commanders defense. T. Higgins also looks pretty good. I want to see what his snap percentage was at. 90% snap percentage. He's all the way back. Definitely can be started in fantasy moving forward. Feel pretty good about this performance from T. With the snap percentage, he only had 3 catches, 39 yards. He almost got a touchdown that he wasn't able to come down with, only 6.9 points, but again, in a good matchup. But nonetheless, you got to feel good about the snap percentage here. And honestly, the target share, not terrible either, over 15%. Got to think he out-targets Yoshavas in games moving forward. Zach Moss continues to be the clear starting running back on this team, the only running back that's startable on this team, 76% of the snaps. He had a 16% target share in this one too, 60% of the rush share, 16% target share. Those are both season highs. Finishes the top 10 running back in fantasy. Now he gets the Panthers. Yes, please sign me up for that all day for Zach Moss. Definitely feeling pretty good about him heading into week 4, and think you probably should be starting him in week 4. And Chase Brown, not startable right now in fantasy. This was his best game of the season, only 8.9 points. He only played 15 snaps, guys. Chase Brown only played 15 snaps. He's clearly behind Zach Moss, clearly not trusted as much as Moss. Mike Gesicki, Another decent game, another top 12 receiver tight end game from him. No touchdown here, but he did 4 catches, 47 yards. Only 50% of the snaps, though, but his usage actually is looking decent. After week 3, I think Gesicki over Hunter Henry might actually have been the right answer after week 2. That being said, Eric Hall, I think, did actually play a little bit more in this game. Seemed like it. Yeah, he played. He actually played less snap percentage-wise, but had another 4 targets stolen from Gesicki. Still think Gesicki's, a risky start at tight end, but definitely the usage there has been strong. All right. That's every single game. The biggest takeaways. What's going on, boss man? How we doing? We're just out here winning leagues, man. This is when you win leagues. All right, we got a question for you. Drop Hunter Henry for Cole Kmet and drop either Ty Chandler, Hopkins, or Judy for Bucky Irving. Yes, drop Ty Chandler for Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving absolutely is a better ceiling than Ty Chandler. I also think Judy probably has a higher ceiling than Bucky Irving, but I mean, Bucky Irving probably has a higher ceiling than Judy until Winston's playing. Then I think Judy maybe actually beats him there. I'm not dropping Hopkins after this week. And I think I would probably drop Hunter Henry for Cole Kmet. I don't think they're that different from one another. Just made a league-winning trade. Gave Mooney, Swift, Steele, Pat Frymouth, Spears, and Robinson for CMC and Kill. Yes, league-winning trade. For sure. Nice work. Anytime you can package a bunch of bench players and like one starter for like league-winning potential starters, do that. What do we do with Tyreek? We hold and buy. We buy Tyreek. Buy Tyreek. It does seem like Tua is going to come back at some point this season. And instantly Tua is a top 5 receiver. I mean, Tyreek's a top 5 receiver when that happens. Start Kyler, Jaden Daniels rest of the year. Yeah, it's probably Kyler, but it's going to be a week-to-week thing probably. And it's a good problem to have. And Javonte Williams, yeah, full panic. I think for Javonte at this point, they're not throwing targets to the running backs as much. The offense isn't very exciting, not scoring enough touchdowns. He's been under 12 PPR points in all 3 games. He also, his efficiency has been terrible. I actually didn't realize it was this bad. Yeah, definitely panic on Javonte. Don't drop him, but see if you can trade him maybe. I mean, under 3 yards to carry all 3 games, just big-time yikes here. For Javonte Williams, definitely fully panicked on Javonte. He only had 18% of the rush share too. Man, yeah, full panic on Javonte. I wonder what his line's going to be set at. Probably like his unders this week. How do we like Baker this week? We'll talk about that obviously in the Thursday live, on the Sunday live, but we got him ranked as QB 16. So is B-Rob a buy? Yeah, B-Rob's definitely a buy. He's a good, really, really high floor option here in week 4. But even before the Eckler injury, he was seeing really good usage, guys. He had at least 12 carries in all 3 games. He had 17 carries last week when Eckler was playing. He had an efficient game there against the Giants. He's seeing goal line carries. I think he's actually top 5 in the league in goal line carries this season. He's seeing some targets too. It's actually his lowest target total of the season, but he actually seeing more targets than I expected. Like pretty high floor option. I don't know what the real ceiling is for B-Rob, but the floor is definitely there for Brian Robinson. So yeah. 1-2 trade McBride for Kelsey. Oh gosh, man. I mean, I don't like trades like this. 1 and 2 though. Yeah, you got to do it. You're 1 and 2. You got to do it. If you're 1 and 2, you kind of do have to trade McBride and Laporta and AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp and Puka. Like you got to make the playoffs, man. Jackson, nothing matters unless you make the playoffs. Like it doesn't matter if we'd rather have McBride than Kelsey in the playoffs if you're not in the playoffs. It just doesn't matter. So yeah, I think it's reasonable. And I think Kelsey is just as good of a chance, if not a better chance, probably a better chance to get you to the playoffs than McBride because he's at least going to play this week. And I don't think McBride's going to play this week. Just trade for Tyreek and King Henry. Nice. 8-man full PPR. Yeah, I mean, this team is absolutely stacked. Absolutely stacked. I mean, it's an 8-man league, so it's a little hard to judge, but yeah, absolutely stacked team. You think CeeDee Lamb will start kicking it up? Yeah, you got it. Do I panic on Mondre? I'm pretty panicked on Mondre because the Pats offense is clearly bottom 5 in the league. The offensive line is clearly not good. All the production from Andre basically in weeks 1 and 2 came after contact. Like he was just breaking tackles behind the line of scrimmage and then making big plays. I don't know how sustainable that is for Andre. And then on top of that, Antonio Gibson's played better than him in back-to-back weeks, which is not good. I mean, 0.3 points. It's tough to sell after a 0.3 point game. Like I don't think you can really sell him now, and he still projects decently as a top 20 running back in week 4. But yeah, I am a little panicked on Mondre. He's a guy that I was nervous to draft before the season, and after this last week. Sell got it high for Kelsey. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Totally fine. I think that's a good move. Yeah. I want to trade HN and DK. I don't really like them. What do you think? Yeah. If you don't like guys, that's always a kind of like a relatively reasonable reason, but you got to make sure you're getting good value return for HN and Metcalf. Metcalf, not a horrible sell high, but I think he's still going to have a good season rest of the way. Like pretty clearly that one of the top 2 receivers on that team and has a massive ceiling every single week. I do think maybe a little bit lower floor than people realize right now. But with HN, he still can win leagues for sure. Sit Richardson for Fields, yes. You almost have to sit Richardson this week. And I mean, he still has an interesting floor, but the ceiling's not there without the passing. Trade Cup for CMC, I think I would do this. Honestly, I'm definitely more I think I'm even more nervous about Kupp than CMC just because of the age. I mean, Kupp is old, guys. Like, Kupp is old. I don't think I would have been drafting Kupp at all. If you had told me that Kupp was going to be out with an ankle injury, I would have avoided him completely. Like, even if it was like, oh, like before the season, for example, they said, oh, Kupp is out for the first 4 weeks of the season, the ankle injury, but he's projected back, say maybe after the week 7 bye. And, that was all priced into his draft cost. I wouldn't be drafting him at all in that scenario. Like, he'd probably be going, round 7, round 8, maybe in that scenario. And I would have been full fading because he's 31 years old, injury history, and now he's dealing with an ankle injury. I mean, we saw what happens when he's out there, in week 1 and a little bit in week 2 without Puka Nacua, but tough run. But I could see the other side of this argument with CMC maybe being even a little bit more risky just with his specific circumstance. But yeah, I think I prefer CMC. I think it's more likely CMC's winning leagues in the playoffs, fantasy playoffs, than Cooper Kupp is at this point in time. Thoughts on Bucky Irving? Yeah, he's a clear ad. We've been talking about him as an ad for literally 4 weeks now. Literally before the season, we were saying make sure you stash Bucky Irving. That's definitely coming true. Hey Sam, hope you are crushing it on your teams this season. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm going to do a review of how my teams are doing either after week 4 or after week 5. Sometimes I wait till like midway through the season because I don't want to jinx anything. But every single one of my teams at least has a win. So, that's pretty good. I'm in 8 different leagues, high stakes leagues. So I don't just like that. I am 3-0 in a couple, 2-1 in a couple, 1-2 in a few, but definitely still, well within the hunt in all those leagues. Would you give up Stevenson for CMC? Yes, 100%. Yep. Especially if you're 2-1 or 3-0, especially. Also, if you have like decent backups. Kyron Brooks for Kupp Garrett. I don't think this is the time to trade Brooks. We're buying Brooks right now because the Panthers have a real offense now. And Brooks has league-winning upside down the stretch. Brooks, the ceiling for Brooks, I think the best way I am thinking about the ceiling for Brooks and have been thinking about the ceiling for Brooks is like a slightly worse version of rookie Saquon Barkley, which is a massive ceiling, a league-winning ceiling. And he might be slowly ramped up. He might split the backfield for a bit, but he has this massive ceiling if he gets the role that he could get. He was the best rookie running back in this class by far. And he only slid in the NFL draft because he was coming off the ACL. And he should be fully recovered from the ACL. It's more than enough time to be fully. Why do you say buy Travis Kelce? Because the Chiefs desperately need Kelce to bounce back. Kelce's been out there almost every single snap. Does not look like I would be much more concerned about Kelce if we saw what he just offered Mark Andrews, where he only played 33% of the snaps. Like Kelce, I think, is actually probably pretty fine. We just saw Kelce have a tight end 1 season, 9 months ago. That wasn't that long ago. I think Kelce could easily be tight end 1 rest of the season. He was on my do not draft list, but at this point, I think he's like a pretty good buy low if people are panicked about him. I don't know if I'd go this far, but like the fact that you're even thinking about this and that it's like a reasonable question is why we're fully panicked on Rachaad White. Yeah, like maybe. I still think Rachaad White probably has more targets. Let's do this comparison quick. Then we are going to wrap up. Rachaad White, Bucky Irving. Yeah, it's got to be White still. Yeah, White still projects a bit better, man, but not by that much. And Bucky Irving, I definitely think will have more rushing yards than Rachaad White in this game. So, yeah, I mean, not great stuff here for Rachaad White. Guys, that's my time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss videos like this in the future. Also, we talk through every single game, and this will be posted on YouTube after. So if you're watching live on TikTok, go to the YouTube Live. Link is right in the TikTok bio, or look up Walter Picks on YouTube. If you haven't checked out the Walter Picks app yet, do not know what you're waiting for. Make sure you download that in the YouTube description and the TikTok bio. It's the best way to possibly help me, and also the best way you can win your fantasy season. All right, we're going to get to one more here. Hey, Sam, I'm 1-2. Should I trade Tyreek, Travis Kelce, and Kyle Pitts for Devontae Adams and Nabers or Brock Bowers? Yeah, I like that. I think I like this trade. If you're 1-2, I think trading away Travis Kelce makes some sense. And I mean, Brock Bowers over Kelce and Pitts isn't like that crazy either. Yeah, I think this is a fine trade to make. Pretty fair trade too. That's my time, guys. Time is the most valuable thing we have. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Again, too, if you have trade questions, go to the Walter Picks app. You can analyze as many trades as you want for free. And if you do the premium subscriptions, you also get personalized insights into how this trade impacts your starting lineup rest of season, custom to your league scoring settings with League Sync. Definitely recommend that for all your trade decisions. Guys, have a great night. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back live Thursday night, posting weekly content on the TikTok and YouTube streams. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for tuning in.